The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Yes, hello. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews. Welcome back to another live stream. Tonight we're going to be continuing our reading from Vernon Coleman's 2021 book, Endgame. If you are tuning in live, it's lovely to have you here. I'm very glad and grateful to know that you are out there choosing to tune into this broadcast. There's a million other things you could be doing, especially if you're in England where the weather's good, it's warm, the sun's been out for days now, and you could be in a pub. I mean, you could be in a pub watching this as well on your phone with the headphones, I guess. You could be in a beer garden, sipping down a cold one. But if you are tuning in live, it's wonderful to have you here indeed. Thank you very much. If you're watching the replay, there's going to be a pinned comment below the video, which you can use to navigate to other parts of this probably 3-hour broadcast. We got a lot to cover tonight. And so if you're watching the replay, avail yourself of that functionality. Jump ahead to something that might be interesting. If you just want to go straight to the book reading, then there'll be a timestamp there to help you do that. So we're continuing with Endgame. This is part 4 in the series. We got to really crack on with this because at the rate we're getting through it, it's going to be a long series, and we're going to be continuing tonight with the letter C. We've done A, we've done B, we're into the C's. The first topic we're going to be talking about is censorship. That's coming up a little bit later, but I do, of course, have a preamble ramble prepared for you tonight. But before I get into that, I want to say hello to Frank, Adam, and Schwam over on YouTube. We've also got Art, Murray, One, and Faith on Rumble, and Odyssey is quiet. I don't know if anybody hangs out on Odyssey. They certainly don't really seem to hang out that often there on my channel, at least. But that's all good. No problem whatsoever. The important thing is this message gets out and it is preserved, and people can discover it at any point in the future, so long as the internet continues to exist and Odyssey as a platform continues to exist. The one thing I like about Odyssey is that all that information on there is going onto a blockchain of some kind. I don't really understand blockchain or how it works, but I do know that that is a little bit more permanent than a YouTube channel or a Rumble channel, where things can be erased with a moment's notice if you say the wrong thing, if you badmouth the wrong people, for example, or if you just have opinions that are not deemed kosher or approved or authorized. You can be finding yourself with a slapped wrist and banned from the platform, as many people have done in the past. But we on this channel, we haven't had any slap wrists so far. We haven't had so much as a stern glare sent in our direction. And I have a feeling it's because the broadcast is so long. We don't have such a huge followership yet, that they're not too worried about the things we're saying and talking about on this channel. It's not the kind of content that goes viral and reaches millions of people all at once and has the power to affect massive change in that way. No, this is more grassroots, it's more organic, it's more word of mouth, and I like it that way. That is the best way for communities to grow, for information to get passed around. It's better that we do it on a case-by-case basis through the power of relationships with people we know and trust and care about enough to send them good information and send them in the direction of broadcasts where the content is a little less alarming, less predicated upon fear and sensationalism. We're trying to get away from all that and dive into the books and do some learning and really uplift ourselves out of ignorance, out of apathy, out of unconsciousness. We're trying to plug into reality as it actually is and thereby have a better chance at not getting wiped out by the world controllers, this parasitic minority of useless elites who are really trying to lock everything down with their digital control grid. So, Barry, good evening to you. Thank you for joining us over on YouTube. Great to see you. Pop in there and say hello. I'm not sure I've seen you on a live stream before, so thank you for your comment. Much appreciated. Okay, it looks like we're good. It looks like all the dials and buttons are in the correct place, and we can get on with tonight's preamble ramble, which I will do right now. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is democracy. We all know what that is. We all know we all love it. We know it's the best system that's ever been invented. We know the unprecedented levels of freedom and peace that it has brought to the world to have these democratic systems. The wealth that we enjoy, the comfort, the luxury, not having to go to work, having anything we want at our beck and call at a moment's notice, enjoying unparalleled levels of health, peace of mind, the freedom to go wherever you want, do whatever you want with whoever you want. It's really incredible the blessings and the benefits that democracy have brought to the human species. Of course, I'm being sarcastic and facetious, but we're going to learn a bit about democracy tonight because, as I said before, we're on the part of Vernon Coleman's book which deals with words, topics, concepts, quotes, ideas that begin with C. And we're going to be moving on into the D section tonight. And part of what's coming up is democracy. So I thought this would be a good place to start with our preamble ramble. So as always, or not as always, but as very often we like to do on this channel, we've got Wikipedia open to see what is the consensus reality. What are we supposed to think about this idea of democracy? And we're going to start here and read a little bit about from the top of this article because it is long. It's a humongous bit of writing, and we're not going to go through all of it. It's very well referenced, though. This is one of the most well referenced things I've seen on Wikipedia. In fact, we've got like 300 references and counting, but we're not going to go into that much depth. I've got a few clips that I want to play for people tonight as well. Get them on the record. It's really good stuff regarding this concept of democracy, which we are told is the best system ever and that we're living in, and we're so lucky to be living under it. So what is it? Well, the word democracy itself comes from demos, which means people, and kratos, which means rule. So it's rule of the people. Wikipedia says it's a form of government in which political power is vested in the people or the population of a state. Under a minimalist definition of democracy, rulers are elected through competitive elections, while more expansive or maximalist definitions link democracy to guarantees of civil liberties and human rights in addition to competitive elections. So the important thing here is really to do with elections and this benefit that we have to participate in these every so often. And as I was reading this, I thought about the word people. And I thought, do you know what? I would like to know this some more about the origins of this word people. So I had a little dig over on Etym Online. And this was quite interesting. So people as a noun comes from the year 1300, from the word peuple. I don't know how that's pronounced, but I'm going to guess it's peuple. And it means humans, persons in general, men and women. So I'm glad they included the human aspect. I'm glad they included the men and the women aspect, although these days some people aren't quite sure what they are. But this person's word is in there as well, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, has another meaning, which means mask. Person, persona. You can, I think it has a connection with the masks that actors used to wear back in the day, in I don't know, maybe ancient Greece or somewhere like that. But at least back in 1300s, peuple meant human men and women. So we're off to a promising start. There's a French meaning here, which is peuple, the word is peuple or pupel, which means people. So that's a helpful definition. But also means population, crowd, mankind as a whole, or humanity. So it's good that this word still denotes human beings. There's also a Latin populus, a Latin origin populus, which meant a people, nation, a body of citizens, a multitude, crowd, throng. But that is a word of unknown origin, which I thought was curious, that the Latin populus, we don't know where that came from. But this is the bit that really stood out to me. There's an Italian root for this word, which is populari, which means to lay waste, to ravage, plunder, and pillage. What tends to happen to populations of people? In a lot of cases, they get ravaged, plundered, and pillaged quite often. So I thought curious that the word people has its origin in this word populari, and the connotations associated with that could be quite revealing about what it means to be part of a population, what the purpose of a population is. It's to be ravaged, plundered, and pillaged, because that just seems to be what happens. History shows us that. There's also a Proto-Italic root, which is said to mean army. And this bit was very interesting. In English, it displaced, so we're talking about the word people, displaced the native folk. So I think that means the native word folk. So people used to say folk. Just like Alan Watt, he starts many of his broadcasts, his recordings with hi folks. He says hi folks. And it's very comforting to hear him say that in his beautiful lilting Scottish accent. So perhaps folk had connotations, a meaning that wasn't as useful to the useless elites or the people who give us our language and our words and take it upon themselves to redefine things and alter the language over time. But maybe we should start referring to ourselves as folk, right? Instead of people, which has this connotation of ravage, plunder, and pillaging. But there's a bit of a more interesting context down here from the 1300, the sense of some unspecified persons. So actually we're getting a little away from the humans, the humanity in the meaning, and it's unspecified persons, or personas, or masks. And it says the meaning, body of persons comprising a community by mid-14th century. And then it says the meaning, common people, masses, as distinguished from the nobility, is from late 13th century. So in the late 13th century, the word people comes to mean the common people, the masses, not the nobility. The nobility are not part of the people, right? The royalty, the elite, the useless elites, the tiny parasitic group of world controllers, they're not part of the people. They're not people. They're something else. That's quite interesting. And then 14th century also had a meaning which was members of one's family, tribe, or clan. Then after 1920, the word people was adopted by communist totalitarian states, according to their opponents, to give a spurious sense of populism to their governments. So this is, it's not looking too good, is it? It is based on the political sense of the word, the whole body of enfranchised citizens, considered as the sovereign source of government power. So there's a lot of history to this word, this common everyday word, people, that I think is curious and worth noting and worth remembering. All these things are tied up in there. It has a long history, and after reading that, I'm kind of thinking maybe we should refer to ourselves and each other as folk. It's got a nicer ring to it, and it's not connected with communist totalitarianism, ravaging, plundering, and pillaging, and a separation from a class of people who like to do that, who are not people, apparently. The nobility are not people. They're separate. But yeah, a little bit of etymology there. So this ties into the word democracy, because demo comes from the word for people. And we'll carry on, because there's a few different kinds of democracy to learn about. So one is direct democracy. This is where the people have the direct authority to deliberate and decide legislation. And there's representative democracy, where the people choose governing officials through elections to do that on their behalf. It says here a little bit about what we were just looking at. The definition of the people and the ways authority is shared among them or delegated by them have changed over time and at varying rates in different countries. Right. So you'll see that this is an evolving thing. It's an evolving system, okay? And there's a bit later on as well where it talks about this being organic. It's this healthy, organic part of evolution, the system that we're living under and that we're heading into. But what are the features of democracy? Well, they are freedom of assembly, freedom of association, personal property, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. Then we've also got citizenship, consent of the government, and voting rights, freedom from unwarranted governmental deprivation of the right to life and liberty, and minority rights. So there's a lot of freedoms, a lot of freedom. It sounds really good when you read this list, right? Wow, there's basically you can do all that in a democracy. Sounds great. I want to live in a democracy, right? But in actual fact, in actual reality, do we have all these things? You know, do we have free speech, for example? Are you allowed to say hurty words on the internet and not have the police knock on your door, threatening to take you away and put you in a cage? I'll let you answer that one. Do you have freedom of personal property? Oops, just clicked onto the wrong thing here. Okay, let me deal with this a second. Do you have the freedom to own personal property? I think in a lot of cases, it's very, very difficult to get to a situation where you can own personal property, particularly if you're young, if you are not the beneficiary of money that has been left to you, if your parents aren't able to help you get hold of enough money to secure a loan to put down against a piece of property so that you can pay that off for 35 years, then, technically you are free to own property. But how easy is it to get to that situation for the average Joe and Jane in the street? Not that easy, I don't think. So there's a lot rolled up into this. We do have voting rights, of course. We are allowed to do that every so often. And we do have, and then minorities do have rights as well. They have a lot of rights. In fact, in some ways, they have more rights than others. Certain resources, they have better, more easier access to certain resources and services than non-minority people. That's a thing that we're seeing being baked into our institutions, our corporations. I was on a training just the other day, in fact, about diversity and inclusivity, and not one bit of the whole training made any sense whatsoever. But I just kept quiet, and I didn't say anything, and I asked too many questions. It was a bit of a struggle session. I knew what I was going into, and I'm aware of the purpose of it. But watching people trying to jump through trying to perform these mental gymnastics that are totally illogical and self-refuting was kind of entertaining. I just sipped my coffee and kept quiet, So the notion of democracy has evolved considerably over time. So there you are. It's an evolving thing. It's just part of nature. It's natural. It's organic. It's evolving. It's progress. And it's good, therefore. It tells us that throughout history, one can find evidence of direct democracy in which communities make decisions through popular assembly. You can find evidence of that. It is there, sort of. The wording kind of makes it seem rare, hard to find. Makes it seem as though most people wouldn't look for that direct democracy. It is there. You can find evidence of it, but it's not the main kind of democracy. It's not the best kind. It's not the representative democracy. The dominant form of democracy is representative democracy. So I like it how they do mention it direct democracy, but they kind of like skim over it quickly and get to the thing that we actually have, which is representative democracy, where citizens elect government officials to govern on their behalf. I heard a fantastic term this morning. I was listening to Pirate Radio Broadcast Network on YouTube, and Vinny Eastwood was on there, and he was talking about how Canada has just suffered from a very intense bout of electile dysfunction. And Canadian friends will know what I'm talking about. It is carnage over there at the moment. But yeah, you've got some electile dysfunction going on. I think you need to get that checked out. Maybe go and pop a little blue pill or something. But representative democracy is what we get. It's dominant, and we get to elect people to do stuff on our behalf. And it tells us as well, in the common variant of liberal democracy, the powers of the majority are exercised within the framework of a representative democracy, but a constitution and Supreme Court limit the majority and protect the minority. Okay, so it's rule. So you have the majority make the decisions, but if they make the wrong decisions, there's a minority to make sure the majority don't make the wrong decisions. So the majority are in control. They make the decisions, but only the right ones, the right decisions. And if their decisions are wrong, if the majority makes a wrong decision, then the minority will step in and correct them. Got that? Makes sense, right? The word itself appeared in 5th century BC in Greece, in classical Athens, and it meant rule of the people. And it was a contrast to aristocracy, which meant rule of an elite. In most modern democracies, this was achieved through the suffrage movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. So this reminded me of our reading and the research we did in Fabian Freeway, which connected the whole Fabian socialist movement with the suffrage movements and a sort of gradual rebranding and pivot into democracy and labeling themselves, such as the League for Industrial Democracy was started by a bunch of socialists. And we're going to see a little bit later, I've got some good graphics to show you and other clips to play that will sort of explain this very, very clearly. But yeah, there's a sort of link between socialism and democracy and the suffrage movements of the 19th and 20th century show that very well. And apparently in 2022, there was a study done which said less than half the world's population lives in a democracy. I think that's supposed to be, a bad thing, a terrible thing. So obviously we need to spread more democracy, whether they like it or want it or not. But the characteristics. So no consensus exists on a precise definition of democracy. Great. So it's kind of you make it up. You decide what it means, and you can choose for yourself whether or not you're living in one. It's mad that there's no precise definition for this, right? It says one study identified 2,234 adjectives used to describe democracy in the English language. That's a lot of words. And if by using all those words, we couldn't come to some sort of agreement or understanding about what the word means, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of scary. Because we're all throwing this word around. We hear it all the time. We're told it's fantastic and we live in it. But there's no consensus on what it means. So is it a useful term? Not so much. If there's no agreement upon what the term signifies, if we can't come to terms on what it means, then it's kind of a useless word to throw around, and maybe it doesn't mean anything. And that's part of the point, right? It tells us that democracies may use many different decision-making methods, but majority rule is the dominant form. It also tells us that democracy can also be characterized as a form of political collectivism. So we're looking at communitarianism, collectivism. Of course, collectivism sounds a lot like communism, socialism. It's all kind of wrapped up. It's all very similar. But the majority ruling is an important part of this. But don't forget, we also care about minority rights. This was the thing that was so contradictory about the diversity and inclusivity training that I went on It was we have to challenge groupthink. And by groupthink, it was challenge, for example, people who don't believe men can become women and vice versa. That's groupthink that we have to challenge. But believing that men and women can change into one another and willy-nilly, no pun intended, that's not groupthink. That's presumably just correct think and has to be enforced. And if you don't think that way, you get punished or you get reported to HR, and all sorts of bad things can happen to you and your career and your income and your ability to buy food. So yes, a lot of contradictory stuff. It's quite vague, wishy-washy, hard to pin down, and I think that's by design. A little bit about the history. It says democratic assemblies are as old as the human species and are found throughout human history. So the system we live in is as old as, it's a natural system for human beings to be living in. But up until the 19th century, major political figures have largely opposed it. That's curious, isn't it? I was surprised to see that there. So it's a relatively newly, it wasn't widely accepted until relatively recently, historically speaking. It says as well that forms of democracy occurred organically in societies around the world that had no contact with each other. So there you are. It is just organic. It is part of evolution. It is as old as the human species, and it is just the natural way for humans to live. And there's also no consensus on a precise definition of what it is. So try and hold that particular piece of doublethink in your mind while we go on to the next tab. So we had a look at that. Oh yeah, and so the key thing about a democracy is the people, or the people. This doesn't apply to us. We're folk, right? On this channel, hi folks, we're folks. We're not people, so this doesn't apply to us. But the people who live in a democracy are enfranchised. So I thought I'd look that word up because it's one of those words. I've heard it. I know what I think it means, but what does it actually mean? Well, if you are enfranchised, it means you give, if you enfranchise someone else, you give a person or group of people the right to vote in elections. So enfranchisement presupposes a group or an entity that has the ability to give a person or a group of people the right to vote. Now, what is that group or entity who has that ability to give the right to vote out to other people? Because I thought the democracy is the power of the people, right? I thought we have the power. So are we giving ourselves the right to vote if we have the power? Is that what we're doing? We're just granting ourselves the right to vote, or is there some external entity that is not part of us that is giving us the right to vote? And if that's true, then who are they? And why do they have the right to give us the right to vote? And why do we not have the right to give ourselves the right to vote? You see? A lot of questions. But another page that popped up and I thought it'd be worth dwelling on in this little preamble is Noocracy. So this is another sort of form of government, part of the politics series, as you can see here. Noocracy. This was a new term for me. I hadn't seen it before, but Noocracy comes from nous, which means mind or intellect, and kratos, which means power. And this is a type of government where decisions are delegated to those deemed wisest. And actually, just saying that reminds me of a book I have down here, which is Jonas Salk's book, The Survival of the Wisest. That's one we definitely got to read on this channel at some point. It's quite a slender book, but Survival of the Wisest. Have a quick look up that one. See how much it costs. It's going to be a good read. But Noocracy. So the wisest are the people who make the decisions. This idea is classically advanced, among others, by Plato, Al-Farabi, and Confucius, who we're going to hear about tonight. Vernon Coleman has, I think, included a quote by Confucius in his book. But when we did another Preamble Ramble, I think 2 weeks ago, we focused on technocracy, and I mentioned there that this idea goes all the way back to Plato. Plato is, a lot of people would think of Plato as the oldest in time, in terms of history and time, the oldest, smartest originator of the modern world and the modern way of thinking. Okay, Plato and Aristotle and their philosophy. They're very legendary. But Plato did advocate for this kind of Noocracy, this kind of technocracy, whereby a small elite with a certain set of skills and knowledge and information would make the decisions and steer society, the masses of society. And he even advocated a kind of, I think it's like a 4-class system, where you'd have that philosopher king and the wise men at the top, and then there would be a sort of priest class, and then a soldier class, and then everybody else, the people, right? The people would be at the bottom, and the non-people would be above them. So there's a lot to this language that's being used. But Noocracy, a new term for me. Let's read a little bit about the development of that. So this fella, Mikhail Epstein, defined Noocracy as, quote, the thinking matter increases its mass in nature, and geo and biosphere grow into noosphere. The future of the humanity can be envisioned as Noocracy. That is the power of the collective brain, rather than separate individuals representing certain social groups or society as a whole. So, tapping into the collective brain in a similar way as the democracy taps into the majority consensus. The collective brain, the worldview that is most common among a given group of people. That's really what collective brain refers to. Because you get a whole group of people together, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make better decisions or be more productive or make more progress on a given project, goal, or endeavor, right? So but we kind of see this coming up quite a lot, the power of the collective, the idea that large groups of people can have a sort of cumulative effect. The more people you add, the more intelligent they are collectively. But I just don't think that's necessarily true. It's kind of, I don't even know if the collective brain is a real thing. I think what they're referring to really is just the consensus. What do most people think about the world? And that comes down largely to propaganda and education and teaching and schooling and cultural institutions and the reinforcement of those by way of parents impressing upon the young what they themselves think and learn, right? So yeah, the collective brain. Anyway, this is part of the Noocracy. Is the power of the collective brain and the subordination of the individual to the power of the collective brain. So that's a really key concept. And one of the things that we see again and again and again is the argument for centralization of power and control is that, we can't let an individual make decisions. We got to make sure it's diffused and dispersed. But continuing, in a more concrete sense, one might find pertinent the paradigmatic controversy surrounding genetically modified food or organisms. So it was interesting that they used this example here. It says, here the opinions of a likely underinformed public, and those of experts are well known to be starkly in conflict. So, on the topic of GMO food, genetically modified food and organisms, I want to bring to people's attention this book, which is Seeds of Deception, and that's by Jeffrey M. Smith. And so, if you happen to be a member of the likely underinformed public, you can pick up that book. It's cheap, it's widely available, and you can get yourself informed and take yourself out of the underinformed group and put yourself in the informed group, right? But of course, the experts know more and they know better, and they are trained and they have the information, and us underinformed members of the public couldn't possibly understand how important it is to eat genetically modified food and allow genetically modified organisms to exist. But this even ties into Preamble Ramble from last week, which was all about techno-Gaianism, if you recall. And a key pillar of techno-Gaianism was genetic modification, not just of food, but also of humans. Remember, they want to make us into nocturnal, vegan hobbits, small in stature, so we don't need as much food, and nocturnal, so we don't have to use as much energy for light, so we're comfortable in the dark, and vegan, so we don't eat meat, because we all know that's terrible for the environment, isn't it? So I wasn't surprised really to see the example of genetically modified food pulled up here, but the point they're trying to make is that this stupid public who are skeptical about these products, that if only they would listen to the experts, you know. But the dangers of GMO foods, as detailed in this book, Seeds of Deception, are incredibly scary, really scary. You can see the little banner across the top there on the very front page, the warning that they've put in the ad, which says, "Warning, GM foods could seriously damage your health." That's right. That's on the front cover of the book. They're so intent on getting that message to people, they put it right on the front cover, you know. So you don't even have to open the book to look into it. But there you go. There's a few bits here about the possible modalities of Noocracy. They talk about Jason Brennan's taxonomy of the roughly equivalent concept he himself calls epistocracy, which is another word for Noocracy. So some of the ways that this could be rolled out, for example, is restricted suffrage. So give voting rights only to those who prove themselves sufficiently well informed to earn the right to vote. And of course, the way you do that is by taking a test. Like, yes, we need exams and tests. We need you to regurgitate information on command within a little time frame, and regurgitate the exact information that we tell you to memorize beforehand. So that's not any way to assess a person's standing with regards to whether they can lead or make decisions, right? Just a test, like an exam. They can be, you can cheat, you can, it's only, exams and tests, they only measure a person's ability to regurgitate information. That's it. But that's one idea of Noocracy, is to test people and only give the voting rights to those who pass the test. You can everyone can take the exam, it says, but only those who show mastery of the basic concepts of political science, economics, and sociology would earn permission to vote. So how much do you want to bet that when they say economics, they're talking about Keynesian economics, who was a Fabian socialist? When they say political science, they're talking about the kind of stuff we were just reading on the Democracy Wikipedia page, right? And not the kind of stuff that you're going to see later in this intro. right? So it'll be their version of these three topics as that is authorized, that is approved by the world controllers, the useless eliters. It'd be their version of these subjects that you have to master in order to earn your right to vote in this system. It says but it does say that they would focus the questions on objective topics. Yeah, okay. I'll believe that when I see it. To create an incentive, voters who pass the test could receive $1,000. Ooh. And if you fail the test, but you want to vote, you can pay a penalty of $2,000. So that's restricted suffrage under a Noocratic system. There's also plural voting. Everyone gets a vote, but the better educated, more informed get more votes. So everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others. John Stuart Mill apparently came up with this. There's also enfranchisement lottery. So this is where there's a random lottery to decide who gets to vote in each election. And there's also epistocratic veto, where every citizen has the right to vote, but an epistocratic branch of government could overrule the democratic deliberations. So again, it's the majority make the decision, but if they make the wrong decision, there's a minority here to correct them and make sure they make the right decision. It says people with conflicts of interest would be disqualified. There would be a council of expert overseers who couldn't create new legislation, but could overrule decisions it deems misguided. The council could block the candidacies of unqualified candidates. And there was a fourth one here called simulated oracle that I didn't understand, so I'm not even going to mention that one. So rationales for Noocracy. So this is interesting because this is kind of criticizing democracy. It says irrationality of voters. So a Noocracy would be better because voters are irrational. Proponents of the Noocratic theory, right? It's just a theory, cite evidence that suggests voters in modern democracies are largely ignorant, misinformed, and irrational. See? So kind of like the likely underinformed public who don't want a bunch of scientists fecking around with the genetic structure of food and animals. Similarly, if the public got together and said, you know what, we actually don't want to be in this system, we don't want anyone to rule over us, they would be deemed ignorant, misinformed, and irrational, and ignored, perhaps. But it says on the irrationality of voters, it can be explained by two major behavioral cognitive patterns. So firstly, most of the voters think that the marginal contribution of their vote will not make a difference on election outcomes. Therefore, they do not find it useful to inform themselves on political matters. There's so much bias in this, right? Firstly, that's been shown that your vote has basically no impact on anything. That has been shown by, I want to say Stanford did some sort of study into this. If anyone knows it in the comments, please let me know, because my memory is crap. But there was some sort of mainstream educational institution that did an investigation into how much impact your vote has, and they found it was like basically none. They published it. It was a mainstream admission, not conspiracy text. So if you read that and you accept the findings of that particular study, and you know this to be true, or at least you accept their methodology, and then you say, okay, well, I'm convinced and I believe this now, and I accept that this is something that is true, then you're ignorant, misinformed, and irrational. And therefore, we need a Noocracy. So that's the implication, right? If you have come to that conclusion that your vote doesn't make a difference to the selections, and that there's always going to be an electile dysfunction no matter what you do, then then you're ignorant, misinformed, and irrational, obviously, and you don't deserve to have a vote. Continuing, though, it also says that due to the required time and effort of acquiring new information, voters rationally prefer to remain ignorant. Oh, it's too much time and effort to learn. Learning. Ugh. Read a book? No, thank you. Give me Netflix. I want to watch Sopranos. There's probably some truth to that. People tend not to want to put any effort in, really, to learning and acquiring new information. It's a huge part of the problem, and I wish more people would put in some time for learning and acquiring new information, you know, because they might, you know, let's say you did start putting some time into learning and acquiring new information, and you read that study which said that your vote doesn't do anything. Then you come to the conclusion that it's pointless voting, and then you don't go and vote, and then you get called ignorant, misinformed, and irrational, and they install a Noocracy without your permission. Can't win. This bit was interesting. It has been shown that most citizens process political information in deeply biased, partisan, motivated ways rather than in dispassionate, rational ways. So, of course, we need our dispassionate, unemotional experts to step in and be objective. We've got all these messy emotions, and we are biased. We have in-group preferences and out-group suspicions, and we can't be trusted to make objective, rational decisions. Do you know what we need to do? We need some sort of, like, reliably dispassionate, objective, I don't know, like an AI system or something, maybe a piece of software that could do it for us. Wouldn't that be good? Take all the human emotion out of it, remove all that messy stuff, and just have it objective, fact-based, data-driven. That's what we need. We don't need a Noocracy. We need AI-ocracy. But one of the, continuing with the article, is it says this psychological phenomenon, so being biased and partisan, causes voters to strongly identify themselves with a group, certain political group, specifically find evidence to support arguments aligning with their preferred ideological inclinations, and eventually vote with a high level of bias. I think that is pretty true for a lot of people. Quite a lot of people seek out information which backs up what they already think. So continuing, this is more rationales for Noocracy. Democracy is susceptible to bad policies. Oh, really? So it says, irrational political behaviors of voters prevent them from making calculated choices and opting for the right policy proposals. I was just wondering, what are the right? Who's decided what the right policy proposals are? You know, again, it's like the disenfranchisement. It implies that there is a right policy proposal. Well, who's come to that judgment? Who's found that out? Who's tested that? You know, it's like you have the freedom to choose, but make sure you choose the right policy, okay? It says, on the other hand, many political experiments have shown that as voters get more informed, they tend to support better policies. Oh, really? Demonstrating that acquisition of information has a direct impact on rational voting. Wow. What a groundbreaking discovery. They've even footnoted that. It's in the book Against Democracy. Another rationale for Noocracy is the use of expertise for efficient outcomes. So according to Noocrats, given the complex nature of political decisions, it's not reasonable to assume that a citizen would have the necessary knowledge to decide on means to achieve their political aims. Again, I was questioning who is their political aims here. I suppose it means the citizens' political aims. But I didn't read it like that at first. I was like, whose political aims? The politicians? The parasites? In general, I think most citizens have the same sort of political aims, really. It's kind of, you know, more freedom, please. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I shouldn't speak on behalf. Like, a lot of people are very scared of freedom. They don't want freedom. They want to be taken care of and looked after and have everything done for them and be told what to think and what to say and where to go and what to do. Some people are like that. It says, in general, political actions require a lot of social scientific knowledge from various fields, such as economics, sociology, international relationship, and public policy. However, an ordinary voter is hardly specialized enough in any of those fields to make it the optimal decision. Well, the reason that you're not specialized enough is because you've been dumbed down by schooling and television, right? You can possibly understand the intricacies and the complexity of economics, Keynesian economics, of course. Sociology, international relations, as dictated and defined by the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and public policy, as defined by the Fabian socialists. No, you couldn't do that. You're just an ordinary voter, hardly specialized enough to make the optimal decision. So again, there's the right policy proposal and there's the optimal decision. And you can sort of see where the arguments for an AIocracy are going to come from. They're going to be very similar to this, I would say. And there's an example here of Singapore. It says that Singapore is structured in such a way that only those with above average skills are identified with strict university entrance exams. Of course, it's exams. And then rigorously trained to be able to devise best the solutions that benefit the entire society. Well, I'm sure that's what they tell you, but I bet it's still a little pyramid system with a lot of wealth going upwards and not much of it going down. It does admit here that Singapore is a technocracy, so that aligns with what we read and learned about technocracy in 2 weeks ago. In order to develop further Singapore's technocratic system, some thinkers have proposed for the country to adopt a model of direct technocracy, demanding citizen input in essential matters through online polls and referendums, etc. So, demanding you participate in their system online. So it's going to be a smartphone-based, digital ID-based system where you are commanded to participate, whether you want to or not. And then that data will be analyzed by a committee of experts. The single sentence here probably tells us everything we need to know about what's coming. They're just trialing it in Singapore first. But there are some criticisms of Noocracy, and there's a whole section on criticisms here saying that it's anti-democratic and that experts can be inefficient. And there's a rejection of demographic unjustness of Noocracy. And I got to this point in the article and I thought it reminded me of some of the resources and videos that I've got. And I thought, you know what? These other people have covered this topic and dealt with it so well, better than I ever could, that I might as well just play their stuff, get that on the record for this little preamble ramble. So that's what we're going to do next. So this is a little just under 7 minute video. I'm going to play it a bit faster so we can get through it quicker. And this is from Larkin Rose, and the video is called The Tiny Dot. So again, on this topic of democracy, on this topic of voting and rights and elections and politicians and Noocracy and experts, I think this little fable communicates some of the problems with that system and even implies the solution to that system. So it's worth just playing in full. So I'm gonna give this a go now. Enjoy.
For 100 million people. They had different interests, different beliefs, different occupations, but for the most part, they got along pretty well. Then one day, a gang of a few hundred people showed up. Need to zoom in some more to see them. I know they're there somewhere. Zoom in. There they are. And this gang of a few hundred said to the throng of 100 million, "From now on, you all have to give us a cut of everything you earn."
This is an accurate graphical comparison between the number of American taxpayers and the number of U.S. congressmen.
And the throng said, "Gosh, do we have to give you a cut of what we earn?" And the gang of a few hundred said, "Yes, you have to." And the throng said, "Well, okay, I guess we have to." And one little troublemaker asked, "What if we don't?" The gang of a few hundred didn't like this and said, "If you do not comply, we shall unleash upon you our legions of enforcers." Then the throng cried, "Oh no, please don't. We will comply. We will pay."
This is an accurate graphical comparison between the number of American taxpayers and the total number of IRS employees.
Time went by, and the gang of a few hundred said, "Now we want more of what you earn." And this kept happening over and over again, until eventually some of the throng were paying almost half of what they earned to the gang. Whenever the gang demanded more, the throng would say, "Golly, we're already having a tough time. Do we really need to give you even more?" And the gang always said, "Yes, you must, or we shall unleash our legion of enforcers." Now the gang of a few hundred was getting trillions of dollars every year, spending it on wars and pyramid schemes, giving away goodies to their friends, buying influence, and doing lots of other things. And some of the throng started saying, "We don't really like the war you're waging with the money we give you. Do we really have to be paying for that?" And the gang said, "Yes, we demand it. Don't make us send out our legion of enforcers." And some of the throng said, "You're taking our money and giving it to huge corporations and giant banks, and some people who just don't want to work. A lot of these things we don't like." And the gang said, "We don't care. We will decide how to spend it. You just do as you're told, or else." And the throng said, "Okay, I guess we have to." But eventually the throng got so fed up, so angry, that they took a drastic step. One day they said to the gang, "We don't like what you're doing. We want a new gang." And after pouring a huge amount of time and money into the effort, they replaced the gang with a new gang. Then the throng pleaded with the new gang, "Now, at long last, can we keep our own money, or at least keep more of it?" And the new gang said, "Sorry, but after much discussion, we've decided that you can't. You have to keep giving us what you've been giving, in fact, a little bit more than before." The throng was distraught and said, "This is dreadful. But after all, what choice do we have? I mean, they say we must comply, and they have that scary legion of enforcers. We're powerless against them. We'd better just do as we're told." So they did as they were told, got poorer and poorer, and lived miserably ever after. But after all, what else could they have done? What power could this throng possibly have compared to this gang of a few hundred and their enforcers? What chance would this thing have against this thing? How could these 100 million people ever hope to successfully resist the awesome power of this tiny little dot? In case anyone missed this, let's review. Here's them. Here are their enforcers. Here's us. Them, us. Them, us. Does anything about this seem just a little strange to you? Are you perhaps wondering, why does the throng need the permission of the dot to do anything? Why do these people feel the need to ask this tiny little dot if they can keep more of what they earn? Why would they spend year after year literally begging for lower taxes from this little dot? Is this dot just really darn intimidating? Is it very persuasive in its reasoning? To be blunt, why would this throng give a rodent's backside what this tiny little dot wanted? The fact that this tiny dot has the gall to issue such demands to such a throng is pretty startling in and of itself. But what is far more amazing is that the throng obeys this minuscule little parasitic gang of control freaks. What could possibly explain this? Let's ask the dot. This is how it works. When we, the dot, take your money and spend it on things you don't like, we're representing you. In fact, though you're not allowed to actually keep your own money, you're allowed to decide which little dot will steal half of what you earn. So that really means that you're in charge and that you're agreeing to give us your money. In fact, we, the dot, are serving you when we take your money and spend it on things you don't like. And so you should thank us and treat us with great respect and honor for having robbed you on your behalf for your own good in order to serve you by doing things you don't want us to do. So there you have it. I hope that cleared everything up for you.
If you're not entirely satisfied with the dot's explanation of things, you really should read the book The Most Dangerous Superstition, available now at Amazon.com.
And I'll pause it there. Yeah, I really do strongly recommend this book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. It's by Larkin Rose, and it is a fantastic, well-written 200-page, I think, little paperback. But it really gets to the root of part of the problem with democracy, which is that we believe other people have authority to do things that we ourselves cannot do, right? And this goes back to the definition of enfranchisement that we looked at the start of this preamble ramble, where to enfranchise people is to give them the right to vote. Well, who's giving that right to vote? Where do rights come from? Are they concocted in a fancy building in the capital city of a country? Are they made by humans and written down on a piece of paper and we all agree on them? Well, most of us agree on them. And then as long as you have 51% agreeing on them, then the 49% have to just live under those rights and that arrangement, regardless of how they feel about it or whether or not they want to. So these questions are dealt with in this book, and I think it's a really good read, and I would like to recommend it. If you enjoyed Larkin's kind of humor and the way he expressed those concepts in that short little video there, I think you will very much enjoy this book. LJ says, purchased A Dangerous Superstition a couple of weeks ago. It's my next book to read. Fantastic. Glad to hear it. And it's not ridiculously priced. I just saw as well on over on Odyssey, ESP says £207.66 used. And that is for this Jonas Salk book, The Survival of the Wisest. Yeah, it ain't cheap. And I got this one very accidentally, randomly, found a cheap copy and pounced on it. And then it showed up and it turned out it was signed, which is really nice. Somebody signed it. I don't know if the man himself signed it. Could be anyone, couldn't it? Anyone could get a pen and just sign it and then pretend it was now a signed copy. But yeah, I think would be a fantastic one to read on the channel at some point. So that's the tiny dot. These are the kind of concepts that are always left out of the discussion, right? If I wasn't aware of Larkin Rose and his book and the next speaker that I'm going to show you, you could go around in circles. Like Frank said, the Wikipedia article is convoluted. You could go round and round in circles discussing these theoretical models. What it actually comes down to is, do other people have rights that you do not have? Because a group of people gets together and calls themselves a government, do they now have rights that you as an individual do not have? How does that work? Either all humans have the same rights, or we all have different rights. And if that's the case, where do they come from? We're being told, or some of us are being told, that things like a man and a woman are just socially invented ideas and they don't exist in reality. Well, I'm telling you that if you think some people have rights and more rights than others, then you're talking about a relativistic system of rights. You're not talking about objective rights. You're talking about you get to make it up. Just make it up. And just believe what you want to believe and bash people over the head who don't agree with your beliefs. That's the outcome of it. So this relativistic way, it never makes any sense. It's always illogical. It's always frustrating. You can never understand it because it's designed that way. Kind of like the concept of democracy, as admitted in that Wikipedia article, there's no clear definition. People are just throwing it around, spreading it into certain places of the world where they don't want it. And we're told that other countries are jealous of our democracy and our freedoms, and that's why they attack us, right? And yet there's no definition. So on the topic of democracy, I'll give you another book here, another recommendation. This is Hans Hermann Hoppe, Democracy, the God That Failed. The Economics and Politics of Monarchy, Democracy, and Natural Order. I haven't read this one. I've just read bits here and there. It's academic. Lots of footnotes, tiny text, but lots of footnotes at the bottom of the pages as well. So, very interesting. There's a lot of different systems out there, but what tends to happen is aspects of these different systems of how these systems work in reality are left out, right? And so to fill in the gaps, we have to go to people like Larkin Rose with the tiny dot video, or we can also go to his Jones Plantation video. Now this one's a bit longer, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I will play you some of it. He's actually made this into a film, but you can watch this 12-minute version and you get the gist of what he's saying. So this is a kind of a parable. It's a narrative story, and it explains the similarities between a democratic system and another kind of system, which the concept and history of which we are probably all familiar with. I'm not going to say it right now because it will trigger things in people's minds and ideas that will taint the message. But I'll play a bit of this. It's worth checking out in full. It's an incredible lesson.
Mr. Jones owned a cotton plantation and many slaves. One day he was talking to the owner of the plantation next to his, and Mr. Jones was lamenting the fact that times were tough. He was having to work his slaves harder than ever, and was having trouble with some of them being disobedient or trying to run away. The other plantation owner said he knew someone who could help.
Day 1.
One day, Mr. Jones called his slaves together so a man named Mr. Smith could talk to them. Before beginning, Mr. Smith whispered to Mr. Jones, "Whatever I say, do not contradict me or interfere, and I promise you your slave troubles will end." "My name is Mr. Smith," he said to the slaves, "and this may be the happiest day of your lives. From today forward, you will no longer be slaves, but free men." Mr. Jones was so shocked he started to step forward, but Mr. Smith gestured for him to remain silent. He did, only because the other plantation owner had spoken so highly of Mr. Smith's skills. "You are no longer the property of Mr. Jones," Mr. Smith continued. "You are free. No more will you be forced to labor for the benefit of Mr. Jones. Now you can work for yourselves." Now the slaves were all murmuring and looking at each other. Many were smiling, many were looking puzzled. "In fact, you are now free to leave the plantation whenever you want," Mr. Smith said. "However, since we are surrounded by other plantations, if you leave, some other plantation owner will likely claim you as his own the moment you set foot on his property. So I urge you not to risk your newfound freedom by doing something so foolish.
It's brilliant. I urge you not to risk your newfound freedom by doing something so foolish as leaving.
Instead, I suggest that you stay here, no longer as slaves, but as willing participants and part owners of this plantation. Yes, this is now your plantation." Mr. Jones bit his tongue to keep from objecting. "For now, we might as well leave Mr. Jones in charge," said Mr. Smith, "since he's the only one with any experience at running a plantation, which is..."
So they leave Mr. Jones in charge because he's the expert, right? These newly freed slaves, they don't have any experience of running a plantation. So we got to leave Mr. Jones in charge because obviously out of everyone there, he's the one with the experience, with the knowledge, with the expert insight. He can understand all these things. He's got that first-hand experience. So it makes sense, right?
It's quite a complicated thing to manage. But he will no longer be your master, but just another worker on the plantation. In fact, he will now be using his organizational and management skills to serve you. Whatever problems you may have had with him before, you are now all equals, and you need each other to make this work.
It's brilliant. He's now serving you, just like the people you elect are serving you, just like the politicians are serving you.
If we all cooperate and work together, we can all reap the benefits together. In honor of this happy occasion, I present you this new symbol of togetherness and cooperation, this flag, which shall be the emblem of the new, free Jones plantation. He held up the new flag, but most of those listening were still too amazed to respond. "And this shall be our motto," Mr. Smith announced. "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all. To celebrate, everyone has the rest of the day off. Enjoy your freedom, do as you please, and be back here tomorrow morning, bright and early."
This works really well. You get in England, we call them bank holidays. We got a bank holiday on Monday. We get the day off. We don't have to go to work, just a free day off. Wow. What such freedom.
"So that we may begin work on this great and noble new endeavor as equal free men." Finally convinced that Mr. Smith was serious, the former slaves applauded and cheered.
Day 2.
So you can probably see where this is going. I might play the rest of day 2. It's kind of hard to stop. I know I keep stopping it and interrupting, but this whole video is so good, I might just play the whole thing.
We all want this plantation to do well, Mr. Smith said at the beginning of the next meeting, so we can all share in the benefits. We all know that it takes a lot of effort to make a cotton plantation work. Just because you're all free doesn't mean you can stop working. In fact, since you're now working for yourselves, I expect you to work even harder than ever before, but now with pride and joy, knowing that you're working for yourselves. Of course, there still have to be rules. If everyone just does whatever he wants, the plantation won't produce anything. This experiment will fail, and we'll all starve. You should be thankful that Mr. Jones has agreed to stay on to lend his knowledge and skills to this endeavor, and I trust you will all do your own part to make this work. Several of you have been chosen to act as project supervisors, to manage different aspects of the operation, to make sure everyone is doing his assigned job, to make sure that the rules are followed, and so on. The rest of you may head out to the fields to start your first day of work as free men.
Day 3.
Start your first day of work as free men.
The next morning, Mr. Smith had a grim expression on his face as the daily meeting began. "I have an unpleasant duty to do today," he said. "Yesterday, Charles was caught keeping some of the cotton he picked, presumably to sell for his own personal profit. That is against the rules. That is stealing. For that, Charles must be punished." Two men tied Charles to the whipping post. "I take no joy in this," Mr. Smith continued, "but you must understand, if we do not maintain order, if we do not have rules that we all abide by, then the plantation will fail, and we will all suffer." The whip cracked against Charles' back. "But if we all pitch in for the common good, then we can all prosper. Being free doesn't mean you should be selfish and greedy. We must each do our assigned duties and obey the rules, and then we can all benefit, and each of you will receive your appropriate share of the profits." A young man named Samuel stepped forward. "But if you and Mr. Jones decide the rules and whip us if we disobey, how is that any different from what we had before?" "How can you say that?" Mr. Smith asked. "I'm shocked. You were a slave before, and now you're free. Things still need to be managed and organized by those best qualified to do so. Do you know how?"
Things still need to be managed and organized by those best qualified to do so.
"How to run a plantation, Samuel?" "Well, no," he answered. "But if we're free, why do we get no say in what the rules are and how things work?" "I'm surprised at your ingratitude," Mr. Smith answered. "None of you know how a plantation is run, so you're in no position to be making decisions about how things are done here. You don't seem to appreciate all the things that Mr. Jones provides for you, from protecting you from all the outside threats that you know nothing about, those who would come here, capture and enslave you if not for Mr. Jones' protection, to making sure that you all have food and housing, tools to work with, that you're cared for when sick and injured, and so on. There wouldn't be a plantation at all, no cotton to pick, no land to plant and harvest, if not for him. You should be grateful that he's made possible the level of comfort you now have. Your lives would be far worse if not for him. Nevertheless, as free and equal participants in this endeavor, from now on, at each meeting, any worker may have 2 minutes to ask questions or voice suggestions or complaints." With that, the workers all seemed satisfied and headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton.
Day 4.
"I have a big announcement," Mr. Smith said as the daily meeting began. "Mr. Jones' cousin is here, and not just to visit and see how our project is coming along. It has been decided that from now on, you will be deciding who will manage the plantation. Of course, this job can't be done by just anyone, but every 3 months we will have a special meeting at which all the workers will vote on whether we think Mr. Jones should run the plantation or whether we think his cousin, Mr. Johnson, should run the plantation. That means that ultimately you are in charge, because you will be deciding which man you want running things on your behalf. If you don't like the way things are being managed, you now have the power to change it." Amazed and pleased, the workers headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton. Days passed, months passed, a year passed, and the plantation continued to operate as before. Sometimes Mr. Jones was in charge, sometimes Mr. Johnson was in charge, but the day-to-day routine stayed exactly the same. The workers worked hard, long hours every day, and still had little to show for it. Every day the meeting would begin with them all reciting the Jones Plantation motto: "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones Plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all." One day Mr. Smith announced, "Samuel is asked to say a few words this morning, and whatever the rest of us may think of his ideas and opinions, we are all free here, and that means we are all allowed to speak our minds. So, Samuel, you have 2 minutes. Begin." Samuel stepped forward, looking scared. "I was excited when all this started," he began, glancing nervously at Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones. "But don't you all see what's happened here? Nothing has changed. We're all still slaves." There were grumbles of disagreement from the crowd. "They tell us what to do and whip us if we don't. They still make all the rules and punish us if we disobey. They let us make suggestions and complain about things, but they never really change anything. They let us choose between Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson, but what's the difference? The situation stays the same. We do all of the work and they take as much as they want and decide how much they'll let us keep. They live in luxury, made rich by the cotton we pick. We do all the work and have to build our own huts, grow our own food, and take care of ourselves. They leave us just enough that we don't revolt or run away. This is not freedom. We're all still slaves. They've only changed the words they use, but nothing else has changed. They say we're all free and equal, but we're not. They command and we obey. That's not freedom. That's not equality. They say we're free to leave, but all that means is that we're free to be someone else's slave. Why should we work or obey the rules? We didn't agree to this. They made the system. They forced it on us. They control and rob us and call it freedom. They've deceived you into thinking that being able to choose which slave master you'll work for is the same as being free. It's not. Open your eyes. If you keep what you produce, they call it stealing. When they take what you produce, they call it sharing and fair distribution. Can't you see that this is all? Your time is up, Samuel, Mr. Smith announced calmly. At his gesture, two supervisors grabbed Samuel by the arms and led him to the whipping post. I'm sorry, Samuel, but you've broken the rules. There are rules against encouraging others not to work and encouraging others to break the rules. You're only hurting all of us with your discontentment and your complaining and your disobedience. The whip fell and Samuel let out a grunt. Without rules, without order, all would be lost. Without law, there would be chaos. We can't just behave as wild animals, each doing whatever he pleases. We must all follow the plan and all do our duty for the betterment of everyone. And those who do not must be punished. The whip fell again and blood flowed freely from Samuel's back. Samuel, it is you who are stealing from the others. When you don't do your assigned work, you are making more work for others. When you disobey the rules, it is you who are endangering the future of everyone else here. You are the thief. You are the criminal. You are the one trying to destroy the arrangement that keeps us all safe and prosperous. At every lash of the whip, the other workers cheered, louder and louder, some yelling curses at Samuel. Being spoiled and selfish, you complain about everything, talking as if you're oppressed. But you are the one ruining things. You are the one keeping us from being all we could be. It is your greed and your rebelliousness that is hurting all of us. They all play by the rules, Mr. Smith said, gesturing at the others. What makes you think that you don't have to? You think you're above the law? There were loud yells of agreement as the whip fell again. We must maintain order, Mr. Smith proclaimed, to make this plantation great, to make it so that we can all be happy and prosperous. To have the society we want, there have to be rules. We all have to contribute our fair share to this great endeavor, and we cannot tolerate actions and attitudes that seek to undermine the amazing things that together as free men we have achieved and will continue to achieve. Mr. Jones was smiling as he gave Mr. Smith a pat on the back. The crowd was cheering so loudly that none of them had noticed that Samuel had died.
What you have been taught about government and politics is no more accurate or reasonable than what Mr. Smith taught the slaves. If you're ready to look through the veil of rhetoric and propaganda to see the reality beneath, get a copy of The Most Dangerous Superstition. It will change the way you see the world.
Yes, indeed. Couldn't have said it any better myself. That story, that little video is so powerful. It really casts a new light on the system that we live in, what we are allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, the people who are in charge. I really like it. It should cause one to start asking some questions. Where does authority come from? Where do rights come from? Do they exist? Is it just something we make up in our minds? Is it arbitrary? Is it relative? Is it just based on belief? And if so, what gives some of us the... Why are some people in a position to come up with rights and enforce them with the violence on monopoly and others are not, right? So a lot of questions, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, but the video really does a great job of at least provoking conversation, discussion, and that's about all we can do in a lot of cases. So we're nearly at the end of the preamble ramble, but I got another clip that I want to show. Very relevant to this whole topic. This is Mark Passio, and one of the things that he came up with was a sort of a revised political spectrum, because we're presented with this political spectrum which has a left side and a right side and then a centrist column in the middle, and you can either be a lefty or you can be a conservative and you can lean to the right. And the left side and the right side, they often are denoted with colors, red color and blue. And I always call it the red and the blue team, right? And we're told these are the only options that exist. This is the limits, the left side and the right side. And there is nothing else outside of that. There's no other way. We're living in the most evolved, advanced, organic system that has been around since humans ever... So it's strange, isn't it? Because that Wikipedia article said democratic groupings and systems have been around for as long as humans have been around. But then it also said that the systems are evolving and organic, and this latest dominant version of it, representative democracy, is the most common. So it's very convoluted, confusing stuff. Mark Passio has an amazing ability to bring clarity and really concise, he uses his words in a very clear, concise way. He often gives definitions, and he speaks with what might be called parrhesia. And if you're not familiar with that word, it's worth looking up and learning about parrhesia. Speaking truth, being very careful and deliberate with your words. Mark Passio, in my opinion, is fairly unmatched for a lot of reasons. Not saying he's right about everything, not saying everything he says is perfect and wonderful and flawless, and the man himself he's a man, right? But he works hard, and he's put out a phenomenal amount of work, which we can all benefit from for free. And this one is a recent one which came out the 2023, and it's an amazing presentation. It's called Two Masks, Same Face: The Dark Occult Origins of Nazism and Communism. Mindhack says this is Mark Passio's best work. I think you're right. I think this is his best work. It's 8 hours long, but it's worth it. It is so complete and so well-rounded. He doesn't leave anything out, really. And this is a little bit that I want to show you where he talks about the political spectrum. So this is the political spectrum as you've never seen it. So we'll just play a little bit here. Obviously, I'm not going to play too much of this, and then we'll get on with tonight's reading. But hot off what we just learned from Larkin Rose and the questions he was asking, that sets the context for this next bit, which I think is really important. Let me press a few buttons to make sure you can hear what he's talking about. I might have to slow it down as well, because this bit might need to be normal speed. All right.
Get out of the mind control methodology that is waged against them of the political spectrum being a breakdown of left versus right-wing politics. This is the traditional view of the political spectrum, where you have on the left side communism and on the right side fascism. And then you have center politics in the middle, okay? There is no place on this chart for actual freedom or abolition of government. There is no place on this chart where the actual coercion and violence exercised over human beings to keep them under government control is absent. So it's all a form of slavery. It's all control over people, whether it's left-wing control or right-wing control. Okay, I have introduced what I call the true political spectrum to try to steer people away from falling into this mind control trap, because that's what it is. It's social engineering the existing publicly recognized political spectrum. Here's a far more accurate, what I call the true political spectrum, and I put even politics in quotes, in double quotes, because it's really not a spectrum of politics. This is a spectrum of human consciousness.
It's kind of hard to read, but I do have a close-up version of this that we can have a look at after. But just listen to his explanation for now.
By which there is only one razor's edge, a needle point where there's true freedom, in the middle at the top of the chart. And I know it may be a little bit small to read here in the audience. People can study it later in the slides. But basically, this axis at the bottom represents control of human beings. And the axis on the left-hand side represents consciousness of human beings. So as consciousness is low, control goes to total. And as consciousness is raised higher and higher, control is less and less and less. The only place where control is absent is in the middle at that 0 point, right at the very top of the mountain peak, or that needle point at the top. Okay, a very difficult place to go to and maintain that position. Most people slide down those slippery slopes very quickly. Okay, so you could see on the left, all the way to the far left, total control or slavery of human beings. You have communism or international socialism. Just to the right of that is democratic, incremental socialism. That's where this country is right now. We're sliding down the slope toward total control. But we're at that point where we are trying to institute democratic, incremental socialism. We're going to talk about that as an ideology later. Then you have a republic based on classical liberalism. Then you have libertarianism, slightly left-leaning perhaps. Then on the other side, you have maybe slight right-leaning libertarianism, and then a republic based on classical conservatism. Then corporate incremental socialism, which is what Nazism basically was, and the fascism under Mussolini in Italy. And then you have outright fascism, National Socialism being implemented as a slavery system. Okay?
I think that's enough of that one to get the point across. But the whole presentation is fantastic. I really encourage people to... Excuse me, I had to cough there. I really encourage people to watch the whole thing. It's fantastic. And download a copy if you can. Take some notes. He drops a lot of names and a lot of new names as well. I think you will definitely learn something new, even if you are familiar with these topics already. But we'll just have a look at the that picture closer up. So this is the same picture again, but you can see that it's this 0 point here. That's where freedom, human freedom, exists. It's a very, very thin line, and then you start to go away from human freedom. This is as people get lower in consciousness and become more animalistic and more base in their thinking and their behavior, in their morality. And this is when, as a result of that, a group of people can step in and claim that they are the arbiters of rights and freedoms, and they get to make the rules. And as we just heard in the Jones Plantation analogy, you know, we're doing it for your benefit because we care about you and we're the experts and we're best placed to do this on your behalf, right? That's the line. Or I should remove N from that word and say that's the lie. But this is a real political spectrum. And it's a little harder to understand, but once you wrap your mind around it, you can really see how false the current paradigm is that most people believe and accept is the only political paradigm. And here's another version that I quite like as well. The real left-right political spectrum. And this one shows you on the very bottom here where you are free and where you are not free. And again, the free is a very, very thin slice right at the far end here. And the idea is that that nobody else can have rights that you don't have. Rights to make decisions, rights to take a certain percentage of your productivity away, rights to put you in a cage, rights to use violence against you, threats and coercion. Okay, if you don't have it, then how can somebody else have it? And they don't magically get it just because a group of people get together and say, we now bestow upon you the right to enact violence and put people in cages and take their stuff. Okay, that doesn't make sense as an explanation as to where rights come from. And then right at the very far end of this is authoritarianism, governmental ownership, mandatory participation. That's the key bit. It comes down to consent. Can you withdraw your consent and stop participating in the system? And then also centralization, and this is chaos, right? What has happened is in most people's minds, they think that top-down control of a minority over the majority is order. And a complete absence of a top-down control system would be chaos. And that's actually the inverse of the truth. There would be more order if there were no top-down system of control that everybody was forced to participate in and to fund and to be part of. Because people would there would be what James Corbett talks about in his book, and I discussed with him in my interview. There would be spontaneous order. And you can see this in action when you find groups of people together. It's not chaos. There is spontaneous order. People find roles, they establish routines, behaviors, they test boundaries and limits, but mostly people will figure that out. They don't need a top-down minority with all the guns and all the force and all the power to make up rules on their behalf. So that's about all I got to say on that. That's where considering democracy and thinking about it and coming up with an intro that helped shine perhaps a new light on the topic for people. That's what I came up with. I thought Locke and Rose and Mark Passio are two fantastic resources, as well as books such as Democracy, the God That Failed, Hans Hermann Hoppe. I'll flash that one back up for you again for those of you who want to note that down. And then don't forget, we also talked about Seeds of Deception if you want to learn a little bit about GMOs and how safe they are. Spoiler alert, not very. So, that's my little preamble ramble for you tonight. And as always, at this point in the video, I will remind you that you can check out allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews if you want to find out ways to support or get in touch or follow the work that I do. It is all right there. Handy, dandy, convenient, and easy to use. So the link to that is pinned at the top of all the chats on Rumble, YouTube, and Odyssey. If you feel like you're getting value from the broadcast, then please consider giving some value in return. But no pressure. It's free to, this would be a voluntary-ist type of exchange, right? I'm doing this because I enjoy it, because I think it needs to be done, because it's fun, and because people are receiving it. People are watching the videos. People are showing up to the live streams. I'm putting it out there voluntarily. Nobody's forcing me to do this. Nobody's standing behind me with a gun saying, you better talk about these books on camera right now. I'm doing it because I want to do it. You're presumably here because you want to be here. And so if you want to, you can support by giving a like or a comment or a share of the links of the channel. You could send a bit of fiat currency, which always comes in useful for, paying for electricity and gas and food and those sorts of things. Or shoot me an email and just send me some of your thoughts, your feedback, your suggestions, your encouragement, your criticism. But, if you are going to criticize, please do it with love, from a place of helping me get better rather than tearing me down and just telling me I'm shit. Because, that's not going to help anybody, is it really? So this is just an example of another way to do things voluntarily. No coercion, no threats. I'm not sitting here saying, you better start paying me, otherwise I'm not going to do this anymore. Nope. That's not the threat that I'm making. I'm not telling you that you better give me 20% of everything you make, otherwise I'm not going to do this anymore. Nope. This is all coercive. This is all anti-freedom. This is all pro-slavery type way of doing things, right? You can do it the voluntariest way of doing it, where you say, I'm going to do this thing. If you find value in it, if you enjoy it, if you want to see more of it, you can voluntarily do something in return to help me out. A like, comment, share, subscribe, that sort of thing. That's how it works. So there you are, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. And now, we can get back on, well, not back onto, we can get onto tonight's reading. That's what I was trying to say. Ugh, my words. I'm not speaking as fluently as I would like tonight, but I'm still getting the words out, and that's the important thing. We are making progress through the plan, through the show. So hope you're all doing well out there on Rumble, Odyssey, on Entropy. I always forget to mention Entropy, and I never check if anyone's there. Looks like nobody's there. That's good. That's probably my fault for always forgetting to have a look and talk to people who are there. But tonight, we are continuing with Endgame, The Hidden Agenda 21 by Vernon Coleman, who a lot of people have sent me messages about, saying, crediting him with helping keeping them sane during lockdowns, crediting him with helping them avoid permanent experimental injections that can't be uninjected once they are injected. Vernon Coleman has helped a lot of people, and he was doing it for a long time before lockdowns began, right? We have covered a little bit about his background. He's been writing books for many, many years. He was a doctor at one point. Then he was a newspaper columnist. And he's been going and going and going. He's obviously been taking good care of himself and keeping abreast of current events and keeping himself informed, because as we saw at the start of this book, he is au fait with many of the topics that we cover on this channel that the other authors that we read cover as well, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the technocracy. He mentioned at the beginning of this book the technocratic system being born in the 1930s. So he knows his stuff. And if you get value from his work, you get value from this reading, please consider buying hard copies of his books, giving them out, sharing them around, leaving them on your coffee table. People can ask questions, and it's a good way to get people talking and thinking a little more about some of these kinds of concepts and ideas. Because the more people become aware of these things and these concepts, then the more likely there'll be some sort of pushback or resistance or effort put to changing the way things are going, which I don't claim is possible. But I do claim it's possible. I don't make any claims as to whether or not it's likely. To share around and show to other people. I believe the stream just dropped out, but then it also told me that we are reconnected. So hopefully we're back up and running. So without any further ado, actually there is one thing I got to do. Hang on a sec. I got to take these headphones out. One moment. Okay. Without any further ado, really, for realsies. Do you ever used to say that when you're at school, like for realsies? You know? When people are like, that accuse you of lying, and you'd be like, no, for realsies. It's true. Maybe that was just a northwest of England thing. I don't know. Continuing tonight with censorship. Politicians and scientists who promote the idea that we are all at risk, threatened by a dangerous plague, have persuaded the media to refuse to allow any discussion or debate about the significance or otherwise of the disease. Indeed, the media have been paid with massive advertising expenditure to suppress all those who raise questions about the validity of the claims made by scientists promoting the plague. Doctors and nurses who dared to speak up were told they would be sacked or lose their licenses. Some indeed did have their licenses taken from them. Never before in modern history has medical debate been silenced so ruthlessly and so dangerously, though there have been warning signs for some time. Let me explain. And I just want to reiterate as well that this book is 2021. So this is in the height of lockdowns, in the height of all the antagonism being directed at people who are asking questions. All these sort of science denier, anti-maskers, anti-vaccine type of labels being weaponized to shut down those who wanted better information, less fear-mongering. All that was happening. LJ, I just saw your question. Anyone else losing sound? Hopefully, no. But is the sound back up and running? Is the stream back up and running? Hopefully it is. If it's not, I'm going to carry on anyway, and I can put up my recording later. So I'm going to carry on with the reading. Hopefully it's coming through. But if not, there will be... Well, if not, you can't hear me say this right now, so I don't know why I'm talking, right? So let's listen to Vernon Coleman's explanation of censorship. A few years ago, he says, I was invited to speak at an important conference in London. The conference was, I was told, intended to tackle the subject of medication errors and adverse reactions to prescribed drugs. The company organizing the conference was called PassTest. For over 30 years, PassTest has been providing medical education to professionals within the NHS, they told me, building on our commitment to quality in medical and healthcare education. PassTest is creating a range of healthcare events which focus on the professional development of clinicians and managers who are working together to deliver healthcare services for the UK. Our aim is to provide a means for those who are in a position to improve services on both national and regional levels. The topics covered by our conferences are embraced within policy, best practice, case study, clinical management, and evidence-based practice. PassTest endeavours to source the best speakers who will engage audiences with balanced, relevant, and thought-provoking programs. PassTest has proven in the past that by using thorough investigative research and keeping up to date with advances in healthcare and medical practice, a premium educational event can be achieved. Iatrogenesis, which is a fancy word that just means doctor-induced disease, is something of a speciality of mine. I have written numerous books and articles on the subject. My campaigns have resulted in more drugs being banned or controlled than anyone else's. A previous government admitted that they had taken action on prescription drug control because of my articles. The conference organizers offered to pay me for 2 hours of my time. In addition to speaking at the conference, they wanted me to help them decide on the final program. I thought the conference was an important one and would give me a good opportunity to tell NHS staff the truth. I signed a contract, and PassTest duly wrote to confirm my appointment as a consultant and speaker for the PassTest conference division. And then there was silence. I repeatedly asked for details of when and where the conference was being held. The result was silence. Eventually, a program for the event appeared on the internet. Curiously, my name was not on the list of speakers. Here is part of the blurb promoting the conference. Quote, against a background of increasing media coverage into the number of UK patients who are either becoming ill or dying due to adverse reactions to medication, our conference aims to explain the current strategies to avoid adverse drug reactions and what can be done to educate patients. Putting the blame on patients for problems caused by prescription drugs is brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant's one word for it. I might just adjust my... Here we go. Let's see. I like that. It is brilliant. It's evil. It's cruel. But it's not unusual. Always blame the victim. That's abuse 101. Most drug-related problems are caused by the stupidity of doctors, not the ignorance of patients. If the aim is to educate patients on how best to avoid prescription drug problems, the advice would be simple. Don't trust doctors. Too many are incompetent buffoons who do what they are told to do by drug company representatives. And this is coming from a man who was a doctor himself. Don't forget. The promotion for the conference claimed that errors in medication account for 4% of hospital bed capacity, and that prescription drug problems reportedly kill up to 10,000 people a year in the UK. As I would have shown had I not been banned from the conference, these figures were absurdly low. I had already published evidence showing that 1 in 6 hospital beds is occupied by patients who had been made ill by doctors, and there was and is plenty of evidence showing that doctors are now one of the top 3 causes of sickness and death, alongside cancer and circulatory disorders such as heart disease and stroke. The list of speakers included a variety of people I had never heard of, including one speaker representing the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry and another representing the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. Delegates representing the NHS were expected to pay £250 plus VAT to attend the event. Delegates whose trust would be funding the cost were asked to apply for a health authority approval form. And so the bottom line was that the NHS paid to send delegates to a conference where someone representing the drug industry spoke to them on drug safety. But I was banned. I was banned from the conference because certain parties felt that he, Vernon Coleman, was too controversial to speak. It seemed to me that the drug industry or people acting on their behalf were deciding who they would allow to speak to doctors and NHS staff on the problems caused by prescription drugs. Why are the people who had me banned so frightened of what I would say? It can surely only be because they know that I would have caused embarrassment by telling the truth. Details of the ban were sent to every national and major local newspaper in Britain. None reported it. I am by no means the only doctor to have found him or herself silenced in some way by the medical establishment. Consider what happened to J. Marianne Thomas, a former specialist cancer surgeon at the Royal Marsden Hospital in London. Dr. Thomas's trouble, I'm going to just circle that name. Be worth looking up that news story. Dr. Thomas' troubles began when he wrote a newspaper article in which he commented that the GP service is hopelessly outmoded. The article had been written in response to a report from the Care Quality Commission. He wrote the article because he wanted to help improve patient care, and at the age of 68 he rightly thought he had experience which made his views worthwhile. Nothing too controversial in that, you might think, but the authorities thought otherwise. The medical establishment does not approve of doctors trying to improve things, and it does not approve of criticism, however valuable or well intended. Here is what happened to Dr. Thomas, a widely respected surgeon with many years of experience, immediately after the publication of his article. 1. He received a letter, which he describes as aggressive, from the Imperial College, where he was professor of surgical oncology. The letter demanded that he immediately sever all relations with the college. 2. A petition was started to have him struck off the medical register by the General Medical Council. He received a message from the Royal Marsden Hospital, where he worked as a specialist cancer surgeon. He was summoned to a meeting where he was told he had brought the hospital into disrepute and would not be allowed to attend until further notice. He was forced to take authorized leave from his work. 4. The chief executive of the Royal Marsden Hospital received a complaint from the professor of general practice at Imperial College. Dr. Thomas reports that this included a financial threat, querying why GPs should be expected to refer patients to the Royal Marsden Hospital when there are many others in London with which they had very good working relationships with the staff. 5. Dr. Thomas was then told that his Lifetime Achievement Award for 31 years of service at the Royal Marsden Hospital, due to be presented at a ceremony the following evening, was to be withdrawn. 6. He was eventually told he could return to work if he signed a document agreeing not to write any more articles unless he showed them to the chief executive in advance so that she could make sure they wouldn't harm the hospital's reputation. All that happened because Dr. Thomas dared to write one sensible article about general practice. The tragedy is that this sad story is not, I fear, in any way exceptional. It is rather the norm. Whistleblowers, truth-tellers, and critics are not welcomed by the medical establishment. The doctors who are seen on television and heard on the radio are, I fear, largely vetted or approved by the pharmaceutical industry and the medical establishment. The two are pretty well interchangeable for their willingness to toe the official line. The same is true to a slightly lesser extent of doctors who write for or are quoted in newspapers and magazines. And remember, Vernon Coleman was a doctor who was quoted in newspapers and magazines at one time. Doctors who speak up on behalf of patients or who try to expose problems within medical practice will be quickly silenced. All this happened a few years ago. After writing several thousand articles and scores of books about medical practice, I have been censored and banned and the subject of numerous complaints. Today, the combined efforts of the pharmaceutical industry and the medical establishment mean that no one will interview me, review my books, or print my articles. Well, and then in steps Hayes Reviews. I'll read your books. It's hardly surprising that very few doctors dare to write anything critical of established medical practices, however damaging or dangerous they might be. During 2020, things got even worse, and the UK started to introduce bans which matched those which have been current in China for some time. It is important to note that China censors rumors on the internet because they could cause social harm. It's never explained what this phrase means. Yeah, that's a good point. Social harm. Kind of like in my diversity and inclusivity training the other day, we were told that we have to challenge unacceptable behavior, right? And but of course, that's subjective. One person's unacceptable is another person's acceptable. So how do you navigate that? Well, you don't. The whole point is it makes everyone extra cautious and scared, and it reinforces a consensus thinking. In other words, it reinforces groupthink, which earlier in the training we were told we have to challenge because groupthink is unacceptable. So you see the circular, nonsensical, self-contradictory garbage that kind of training really is right there. Similar kind of thing with this accusation of social harm. The UK, continuing, is planning to make content which has been disputed by reputable fact-checking services less visible to users. Oh, great. So, again, it's the same function. Reinforce the consensus. Drown out any dissenting voice. Make sure people are scared and uncomfortable to ever question anything. And shame them, bully them. In other words, they're just struggle sessions. You know, that's what I said to a colleague of mine, like, oh, I'm going in for a struggle session. Continuing. There has never been any attempt to explain what the phrase reputable fact-checking services really means. And there is no doubt that many fact-checking services are paid for and controlled by governments and billionaires with their own financial and political interests to pursue. The UK government is planning to appoint a regulator who will decide what is the truth and what is accurate. Yeah, so that's what it's all about, isn't it? You don't get to decide because you are a member of the public and you're too dumb and emotional and you don't have the requisite experience, training, knowledge, and expertise. So we gotta outsource that. Give it to a little minority of people who will enforce what the majority is supposed to think and do and say at any given moment, because this is a democracy. Make sense? Got it? Finally, it is worth remembering that the world's governments now regard China as having the system to aim at. Things are now so absurd that although I would like to write a book about censorship, I know that no one would publish it. Since the very beginning of 2020, I have been banned, suppressed, libeled, defamed, monstered, and demonized. Curiously, other authors have been allowed to write about topics even though my books on those subjects have been banned. A thief stole one of my books and reprinted the whole thing under his name, taking the royalties from the sales. The publishing platform did not ban the book, although exactly the same book had been banned and removed from sale when it had my name on the cover. Wow. That'd be worth finding out what book that was. I'd be really torn there because I'd want to buy a copy to read Vernon Coleman's words, but then I'd be, supporting the thief and he'd be getting the royalties. So, as I mentioned a little earlier, in this book, I have experience of Chinese censorship myself. Nearly a decade ago, I wrote a weekly column in one of China's biggest circulation newspapers. After a few weeks, I sent in a column criticizing some aspects of inoculation. The editor's response was immediate and dramatic. He insisted that I replace the column with something else. It seemed that no one was allowed to criticize this procedure, but the matter didn't end there. A very short while later, I received an email from my Chinese book publishers telling me that they would stop selling my books, which were bestsellers in China at the time, and that they would not publish any more of my books. When I showed some surprise at this, they told me rather shamefacedly, I thought, that they had been instructed that foreign authors writing on medical subjects were no longer to be published in China, and that indeed only selected publishing houses would in future be allowed to publish books on medical matters. It seems that for some time, any criticism of inoculation has been frowned upon very severely. In 2011, I wrote a book on the subject. I sent out around 620 review copies, a very high number. As far as I am aware, not one review was published anywhere. Several books were actually sent back by editors who were obviously unhappy even to have the book in their offices. The book has, for nearly a decade, been an international bestseller. People want to know about injections, especially nowadays. All right, the next section we're going to do is chains. We all create chains for ourselves, burdens and responsibilities, but this natural phenomenon has changed. The chains are now being made by those in authority and imposed upon us whether we want them or not. And remember, what is authority? Authority is the most dangerous superstition. So that links very nicely with Larkin Rose's book, which I just realized, I don't have a copy of that book, and I couldn't come on here and talk about it and recommend it without having a copy. So I ordered a copy right before we went live tonight. So I've got a copy on the way. But I thought I can't be talking about it and pointing it out to other people, and I'm not supporting Larkin by having my own copy. So I do have a copy of that on the way now. But that's the thesis of the book, is that authority is the most dangerous superstition. Because when you believe in other people's authority, that's when you get your head caved in and you get robbed and you get all manner of horrific things done unto you. So the next section is chemtrails. It has been known for years that chemtrails are used to change our weather, but there is now also evidence that chemtrails are being used to distribute nanoparticles into the air. So nanoparticles takes us back to last week's Preamble ramble, where we discussed to give it its full title, it was something like dark, bright, green, environmental techno-Gaianism. Geoengineering, which we touched on already today in the of humans and food and animals, but also modification of the weather. This is all Wikipedia where we learn all this stuff, right? But yeah. Continuing, just what purpose these have is the subject of rumor and conjecture, but the absence of any clear-cut information from the authorities means that the rumors and conjecture will continue and will in the end probably be proved correct. The solution? Well, there is no certain way to avoid the chemtrails, but it seems wise to stay indoors and to keep the doors and windows closed if you can see a chemtrail in the sky near to your home or workplace. Well, I mean, that is probably not bad advice, but good luck. How long would you have to stay indoors? You'd never go out. Children. From the beginning of this fraud, children have been used to control their parents and the whole agenda. Using Greta Thunberg, the ever-young Swedish truant girl, that seems more appropriate than calling her a schoolgirl, as a figurehead and was a clever ploy, because Ms. Thunberg attracted a huge following among children of all ages. Her end-of-the-world scenario and forecasts of doom and a lost future created massive fear among children, and many became psychologically disturbed by what they were told, which was the whole point of this whole thing, is to scare the bejesus out of as many people as possible, right? The children duly started to control their parents, demanding that recycling be taken very seriously, that fossil fuels be eschewed, and that the climate and environment be put at the top of their thinking. This was a ploy used by the Nazis during the 1930s. If you control the minds and fears of the children, then you can more easily control the minds and fears of the parents. And that's a good little reminder to check out Mark Passio's presentation, Two Masks, Same Face, on the occult origins of the Nazi Party. The same technique has been used since the start of 2020. Children were deliberately terrified. They were told that they would die and that if they took the virus home, that they would be responsible for killing Granny and Grandpa. The constant bickering about whether to open schools and the absurd rules which were introduced were designed to heighten the anxiety in the knowledge that the uncertainty and the fear would be transmitted to parents. Exactly. All by design. One of the most significant Agenda 21 plans is to take children away from their parents and to allow the state to bring them up so that they think the right way and have the correct attitudes. And, you can see this creeping in. I've heard from colleagues with children in schools that if you if you take your child out of school, you have to pay fines. So you're already paying your taxes on everything you buy and everything you do all the time, every day. You're already paying on your bills, which go up every single month on month, and you're hanging in there. And let's say you get a good deal on a holiday and you take your child out of school, you get hit for another fine. And if you do it too many times, they will send like social services round to your house and accuse you of neglect for wanting to give your child happy memories of being on holiday, and maybe having to do that at a budget, i.e. out of peak time, so not during school, because everyone goes on holiday during school holidays, obviously. So it's forcing you to have to travel at a time when all the prices are high anyway, and then punishing you if you don't have your child in school as much as they tell you you have to. And that's only going to get worse as data collection goes up and AI tools get introduced. It is worth remembering that Lenin believed that by brainwashing children early enough, he could train them to become genuine communists. And of course, Francis Xavier, co-founder of the Jesuit order, is famous for his saying, "Give me a child until he's 7 and I will give you the man." So next we got a section on China, or China, as the Don likes to say. China is the model for the New World Order. Every government in the world now wants to be like China, and the world government which is being planned will be very similar to the China of today. That's the plan. So, that's something to look forward to. If you want to know the sort of world we'll be living in, then take a close look at China. Billionaires and ambitious world government types realized long ago that China had become the West's most serious competitor in business. That bit, I'm less... Yeah, I think there's more to the story. I think by design, China was chosen to be the world's producer of stuff, right? Cheaper labor, less rights, less care given for the well-being of the workers and these sorts of things. The gradual deindustrialization of the West, the exporting of all factories and productive output over to China was a deliberate thing. It was organized. Like the idea that China's the main competitor, and yet at the same time we will tear down our factories and rebuild them over in China because it's cheaper to manufacture stuff over there. And by we, I just mean international corporations. It's a bit over. It's more complicated, right? And so I think this China is the most serious competitor is a bit of a oversimplification of the truth of the matter. But anyway, continuing. This helped drive their interest in promoting Agenda 21. If you look closely at the aims of Agenda 21 and the way China's run, you will quickly find that there is virtually no difference between the two. China is the blueprint for all our futures. China has proved itself very capable of growing economically, and so it is that their system is well loved by billionaires. Meanwhile, Britons should be aware that much of their country is now owned and controlled by China, through firms which are in practice an extension of the Chinese Communist Party, a close relative of Agenda 21's communitarianism. The General Nuclear Power Group, which is owned by China, owns 2 British wind farms and a big chunk of Hinkley Point Nuclear Power Station. It wants to be involved in the building of 2 more nuclear plants. The state-owned Huaneng Group is building Europe's biggest battery storage facility in Wiltshire, and Chung Kong Group bought a big chunk of the UK electricity networks in 2010. China could close Britain in a minute if it chose to do so. And it's worth remembering that Chinese citizens living outside China are legally obliged to help their country's intelligence services if told to do so. I did always wonder why there's a Chinese chip shop in every single town and village, and why there's a Chinatown in every single city, you know, pretty much. All right, next. Chrislam. There is a plan afoot to merge all religions into one. I think the term for this is ecumenism. I think. I might be wrong. I'll put a question mark because I'm not sure. creating a new global religion suitable for a world which has a global government. And then also some people think this might be the Baha'i faith, right? Which is something we might have to do on another preamble. I think I spelled that wrong, but the Baha'i faith is what you can look up for that. There are several names for the new religion, but the one which seems most popular among the movers and shakers, such as Tony Blair, the Pope, and the UN Secretary General, is Chrislam. There was even a World Chrislam Day held on May the 14th in 2020. Ooh, anniversary coming up, if you're interested. You got about 12 days left until Chrislam Day. Those who find this difficult to believe should just key Tony Blair and Chrislam into a favorite search engine or try Pope and World Chrislam Day. Christianity and other religions will in due course become illegal. Christmas. I might put a little tab on this page to remind me to check it out. I think that could be an interesting preamble ramble. Ecumenism, Baha'i faith, and Chrislam. I got a few Orthodox Christian friends who might want to weigh in on that as well. And if you want to know more on Orthodox Christianity, you could probably go check out Jay Dyer. All right, Christmas. By late 2020, it was patently clear that one of the main plans of the restrictions being engineered would be to ensure that there were very little opportunities to celebrate Christmas. I have no doubt that this policy will be maintained in future years. There are several reasons for this. First, of course, Christmas is, despite the commercialism, a Christian festival. Our future world government needs a world religion, and Christianity has to be contained within the new global religion, which has a number of names, but which, for obvious reasons, is usually referred to as Chrislam. Second, the aim is to remove a festival which, even for non-Christians, is very much an annual focus. People look forward to Christmas as a party season. It's an opportunity for celebrations and feasts, and for people to get together with friends and relatives they may not see for the rest of the year. In order to push fear and anxiety deeply into a nation's psyche, it is necessary to remove all chances for pleasure, relaxation, and joy, and to make people's lives as deeply miserable as possible. Cancelling Christmas also helps to isolate people who may be lonely for much of the year from their friends and relatives. We must never forget that the people running our lives are truly evil, who will do anything to further their Luciferian aims. The followers of Agenda 21 have weaponized Christmas and will doubtless weaponize other crucial holidays. There are several advantages to making Christmas nigh on impossible. First, of course, they want to damage Christianity. The Christian Church establishment seems to be keen on this because they are committed to Agenda 21 and the one world religion. Christmas is, of course, the most significant and well-known Christian festival. Second, closing Christmas will mortally damage small businesses. Most small businesses make most of their annual profit in the month of December, selling gifts and treats to those who want to celebrate Christmas. The Agenda 21 plan is to destroy these small businesses, and cancelling Christmas is an excellent way to do this. There are still those who don't understand why they would want to do this, but the answer is simple. The plan is to destroy all small businesses, something constantly favoured by the European Union, for example, so that large international businesses with their many lawyers and lobbyists can grow into complete monopolies. If you doubt this, then just look at the way billionaires' wealth was boosted during the first few months of 2020. Third, closing Christmas, or even just threatening to stop it, to turn it into a digital Christmas or to prevent families meeting, is all part of the policy to break down families and communities and to isolate all of us as much as possible. Fourth, holding people under house arrest increases ill health, increases the number of deaths, and increases fear. Even the World Health Organization has confirmed that keeping people shut in their homes is of no value in preventing the spread of flu or flu-like viral infections. Yeah, it's all for psychological manipulation and mind control. Okay, next section is church. Places of worship are shut or open only for an hour or two at a time, and for the first time since the general papal interdict placed on King John in 1208, our parish churches were shut at Easter in 2020. But did any of the other religions shut their places of worship down? That's something worth investigating. Continuing. Wars, invasion scares, the Black Death, and so on have come and gone, but still the churches didn't close. They were indeed places of refuge. But church leaders of all colours committed to the Tony Blair-backed global religion, Chrislam, have locked the doors and hidden away. Where have all religious leaders been hiding? The Church of England has been a political party for some time. After the electors of Britain voted to leave the European Union, the Church of England continued to campaign against Brexit. It seemed that the Archbishop of Canterbury and a congregation of his colleagues decided that they knew better than the electorate. This was, of course, a policy entirely in accordance with Agenda 21. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and other places of worship are likely to remain completely or partly closed. Religious leaders of many types have been convinced by the plan for a world religion, and they are accepting official guidance to stop their congregations worshipping in traditional ways. Even when places of worship are open, strict guidelines will remain in place, and singing and the sharing of prayers will be banned. In recent years, the Church of England appears to have been doing everything it can to destroy its relationship with its congregation. In one short period recently, Norwich Cathedral introduced a 55-foot-tall helter-skelter. The result was described as poisoning the very medicine the cathedral offered to the human soul. Rochester Cathedral put a crazy golf course down the central aisle, and Southwark Cathedral had a frock show as part of London Fashion Week. Ironically, in early 2021, churches which were closed for services were opened to be used as inoculation centres. LJ, I saw that you said the sounds in and out. You might have try Odyssey or the Rumble stream. If not, I'll put up a replay that has uninterrupted sound. All right, next bit is class division. An entirely new class system is being designed as part of the Agenda 21 program. There will be two classes, the controllers, the UN employees, global warming mythmakers, and, as a serving class, the drones, who will be everybody else and who will effectively be slaves. I think you might be correct about that. Communities are going to be divided into two. Those who work for the government or local authority, and those who don't. Individuals who have secure civil service appointments will have far more job security. They also enjoy regular pay rises and good secure pensions, and they work far fewer hours. The problems of 2020 have exacerbated the size of the gulf between the two halves. During the shutdowns, civil servants did little or no work but continued to receive their full pay, and were comforted by the thought that when the restrictions ended, their jobs would be waiting for them. Clausewitz. It was Clausewitz, the legendary German military author, who pointed out that it is never sensible to make your plans according to what your enemy might do or intends to do, but only according to what he can do. Cognitive dissonance. I suspect that cognitive dissonance is greater with age. The longer you've lived, the more likely you are to find it hard to believe just how much people are now lying. Hitler and Goebbels were perhaps the first to realize that if the lies you tell are big enough and you tell them often enough, then people will believe you. Most people are fairly trusting, and although they realize that politicians are liars, they do not believe that even politicians would introduce national house arrest, force members of the public to wear face coverings, and destroy a nation's culture and economy without good reason. But of course, it has been clear since March 2020 that politicians have been doing all those things without good reason, and that they will continue doing all those things until they are stopped by the courts or removed from office. Voters are faced with three problems. First, the courts are now largely controlled by what we must regard as the enemy. The justice system no longer operates to protect the public, but now exists to protect the politicians and their billionaire friends. Second, in Britain, at least the government halted all elections. Second, in Britain at least, the government halted all elections. For how long will democracy be suspended? Permanently, perhaps? Third, most people accept what is happening because they believe that the restrictions are necessary and have been introduced to protect them. The longer the fraud continues, the more difficult it will be to persuade individuals that they have been misled. that the virus is no more of a threat than the ordinary flu. Indeed, for people under 80, it is probably less of a threat than the ordinary flu. There are two reasons for this. First, people have invested a good deal of faith in the new rules. Yeah, that's the important word there as well, faith. They will be reluctant to admit that they were hoodwinked. Second, the face coverings in particular are causing brain damage, and as the weeks and months pass by, the brain damage done by hypoxia and hypercapnia will be considerable. Collaboration. The Agenda 21 definition of collaboration appears to be the people will do what they are told to do. That's a short but sweet section. Common Purpose. Common Purpose is a UK charity which apparently claims to develop leaders, to remove prejudices, and to create elite leaders. It seems to critics and skeptics that the organisation has much in common with the aims of the European Union and therefore Agenda 21. That would be another good preamble to look into, I think. Communitarianism. The principle behind communitarianism is that individual rights are always a threat to the community. So that's an attack on the individual again. Kind of like the Noocracy that we discussed in tonight's intro. Whether the community is local or global. Yeah, the global community, right? Is that this one? The global village? No, sorry, it's this. Our global neighborhood. That's the report of the Commission on Global Governance. There you go. You may believe you have rights over your body, your mind, and your spirit. You may believe you have a right to own a home, maybe with a garden, and have a family and to plan your future the way you would like it to be. You may believe that you have a right to earn money to feed and clothe yourself and your family. You may believe you have a right to move about freely. But again, to link it back to the intro, where do rights come from? This is an important question, right? But under communitarianism devised by Agenda 21, you have none of those rights. Your rights are a danger, and so you must be watched, regulated, and controlled. The United Nations has given itself all the rights you thought you had, and through Agenda 21 and communitarianism, it will decide what you do, where you go, where you live, and how you live. The big society nonsense devised by former Prime Minister David Cameron was, of course, a version of communitarianism, stepping stone towards the global neighborhood. Company directors. New rules mean that companies must now have some female directors and some ethnic minority directors, regardless of the availability of suitable candidates. What this means, of course, is that a few people will be given lots of directorships, regardless of their talent, knowledge, experience, and suitability. That's the diversity and inclusivity. That's what I've been learning about. Computerized medicine. Back in the early 1980s, a friend and I wrote the first medical software for home computers. I wrote the algorithms and my friend Russell Smith wrote the computer code. The software sold around the world, but not many people had computers, so the project wasn't an enormous commercial success. Still, it was the first attempt to produce medical software for home use. The original idea was based on a book of mine consisting of a series of flow charts which was called Aspirin or Ambulance. The concept was quite simple. Readers would use the software to decide whether or not a particular problem required a doctor or hospital, the ambulance in the title, or could be dealt with at home, the aspirin. Today, of course, that simple concept has been taken a good deal further, and computer programs now are so sophisticated that computers have been ranked as better diagnosticians than human doctors. They are also better at selecting the most appropriate treatment. And now that robots can perform surgery, there's no real place left for the human doctor. A few decades ago, human doctors had an edge over computers. The human placebo response gave real doctors a considerable edge. A kindly, sympathetic physician who was trusted by the patient he was treating would have a much better cure rate than a cold, unemotional doctor who merely asked questions, did a little prodding and poking, and then scribbled out a prescription. Sadly, that edge has long since been lost. Modern doctors now work the same sort of hours as council officials and librarians, and the vast majority no longer provide a 24-hour service for 365 days a year. Worse still, GPs are extremely reluctant to do home visits, and many are deeply reluctant to see live patients at all, preferring to speak to patients via the telephone or a video link. It is difficult to avoid the conclusion that human doctors have little or no future. Whatever happens to the Agenda 21 plan, there is little doubt that the changes in the way medicine is practiced will be permanent. A young person who wants to work with people and help mankind would be wise, if they are also good with their hands and prepared to make home visits, to consider a career in plumbing rather than a career in medicine. It's pretty good advice. Confiscation. The huge costs of the shutdowns in 2020 and 2021 cannot possibly be met out of new taxes. Inflation will be used to help eradicate government debts, but even that will not be enough. Governments will introduce confiscation policies. The events of 2020 gave politicians and bureaucrats the chance to provide grants and other forms of financial support for a wide range of organizations. When interest rates rise, those debts will be unpayable, and governments will claim control of companies large and small and of many types of private property. Astonishingly, governments around the world have proposed increased funding for local authorities and organizations which face budget shortfalls. The plans for Agenda 21 mean that there is absolutely no incentive for public officials to balance their budgets. All this leads directly to central control. Confucius, quote, "If a state is governed by the principles of reason, poverty and misery are subjects of shame. If a state is not governed by the principles of reason, riches and honors are the subjects of shame." Right. Pretty deep. We are living in a time where are riches and honors the subjects of shame? That would suggest we are not governed by principles of reason, but I'm not sure. Not quite sure what you're getting at here. So, next is conspiracy theory. Everything which is not officially accepted is now regarded as a conspiracy theory, and the phrase is always used as a term of abuse. Anyone who tells the truth about just about anything is now labeled a conspiracy theorist by the fascists at Wikipedia and the BBC. In reality, a conspiracy theorist is someone who believes that politicians lie, and the antonym of conspiracy theorist is moron. I mentioned this with some hesitation when my book Gordon is a Moron was published, describing the misadventures of Gordon Brown as Prime Minister. I received a number of complaints from readers who thought the title genuinely unfair to morons. The truth, of course, is that those who are planning to take over our world and our lives are conspirators and could accurately be described as conspiracy practitioners. And again, as I've said before, the number one cause of conspiracy theories is government secrecy, censorship, and the redacting and hiding of secrets behind, the Official Secrets Act, for example. It means we all have to guess what's going on. Okay, next bit is control. We have to be aware of the tricks being practiced by our governments, under the advice of their mind control experts and warfare specialists. They attack in many ways and on many fronts. Take a look at my video on brainwashing techniques to understand more of how they do it. The transcript is on my website, vernoncoleman.com. There are a number of traditional military techniques. First, they want to suppress the truth. To do that, they must silence journalists who might share facts with the public. The mainstream media has been bought with massive advertising budgets, paid for by taxpayers and designed to promote official lies. Suppressing the truth also involves demonizing individuals by using Wikipedia and other websites to make truth-tellers look bad and untrustworthy. And of course, platforms such as YouTube are helping by censoring, deleting, and banning videos which contain the truth. But oddly, no one fact-checks Prince Charles. He now claims that we need 4 planets to sustain us. This is pseudo-scientific nonsense, of course. There's plenty of food on the planet. It's just usually in the wrong place, and much of it is wasted. Second, while suppressing the truth, they plan to deceive us. This simply means lying. They tell us all lies all day long, and these lies are disseminated by the mainstream media with remarkable enthusiasm. In the old days, journalists used to check press releases. These days, they just put their name at the top of the press release and hand it to their editor, who prints it. Governments keep the lies coming at a rapid rate so that we can't keep up and don't have time to check their allegations. The compliant media organizations constantly run propaganda campaigns. A day or so before the UK government announced its latest restrictive laws, the BBC website ran an article quoting apparently ordinary people who wanted more rules. Third, they want to distract us by constantly changing the rules and by pointing us in the wrong direction when we try to work out what's going on. They hope that in the end we will be so committed to trying to work out whether or not we must recite nursery rhymes when we go shopping that we hardly know what day of the week it is. The constant rule changing is not a sign of confusion in government. It's a sign that they are simply trying to increase their control over us by making us more stressed and fearful. The media is essentially in this ploy. I think the thing you want to look for as well is Biederman's chart of coercion. I think I was spelling the name right. And he outlines the steps involved. I've spelled coercion wrong now. Don't copy my spelling. But Biederman's chart of coercion was based on what communists did to American soldiers, I think. And it was remarkably similar to what was done to us during lockdowns. In fact, it was a play-by-play account. Fourth, they want to exhaust us. An exhausted enemy is one that is easy to conquer. They deliberately want to exhaust us, confuse us, humiliate us, and depress us. Our own governments want to increase the amount of depression among the population. Governments all around the world are responsible for the massive increase in suicide, particularly among children and young people. What sort of evil is this? In the UK, the Royal College of Psychiatrists has estimated that 8.4 million people are now drinking hazardous levels of alcohol. Fifth, they must abuse those who are not convinced by their lies. They want to separate us and isolate us. In the UK, the rule that only 6 people can meet together is a standard trick to prevent the resistance movement gaining strength. They know well that revolutions invariably start in cafes where people meet and talk. When folk are there's that word again, folk. Nice. When folk are isolated in their own homes and cannot meet up with friends, then the risk of revolt is reduced. The rule of 6, as they call it, is partly designed to stop demonstrations and meetings. Remember, everything that has happened was meant to happen. Within a few years, or even less time, the one world government will, if the plans are not stopped, be controlling every aspect of our lives, including our access to our own money and our access to genetically modified food. I added the genetically modified bit there. Next is a quote from Oliver Cromwell. Quote, "You have sat too long here for any good you have been doing. Depart, I say, and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go." And that was Oliver Cromwell's speech to the Rump Parliament in 1653. All right, now we're on to cycling, cyclists, and cycle lanes. Cycle lanes are being created around the world. Huge sums of money are being spent on marking off parts of existing roadways or pavements for the exclusive use of cyclists. When roads lose a large portion of their area, they are inevitable extra queues for cars and lorries. This causes extra pollution and lowers productivity. Cyclists think they are green and are saving the planet, but they are actually selfish and intensely annoying individuals, usually equipped with cameras, lycra, and an attitude problem. They cycle along, usually a yard and a half from the near side curb or in pairs, and that huge queue of traffic builds up behind them traveling at 10 miles an hour. At this speed, cars and lorries are far less efficient, and so they throw out far more toxic fumes than if they'd been able to travel at a more reasonable speed. Drivers who travel too slowly may be arrested for causing a long tailback. Cyclists, who are the darlings of Agenda 21, are never arrested, nor do they pay any road tax for the use of the roads and special cycle lanes. That's a really good point too. Oh, sorry, I'm muted there. I thought I'd unmute myself. I'll restart that bit. I was reading this bit. Death. Death is not what it used to be. Most of the people who die are now given entirely false death certificates. GPs in the UK want to certify death by using an application called Zoom. This allows them to certify patients as dead without having to leave their armchair or the golf course. Just how doctors can certify a patient as being dead without using old-fashioned methods such as listening to the deceased's chest or looking for a pulse has not yet been explained, probably never will. Debt. The US federal government now owes $27 trillion that it cannot possibly ever repay. Individual Americans owe another $53 trillion, and the American government has signed IOUs worth $210 trillion in pensions and social security benefits that it will never be able to pay. That's very important. If you want more information on all this, you want to check out Parallel Mike's channel, and especially his interviews and conversations with David Rogers Webb. Also, David Rogers Webb has a book called The Great Taking, which you can download for free from his website. I think it's thegreattaking.com. To make matters worse, the American president, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, has pledged to spend $2 trillion over 4 years to ensure that the U.S. economy is completely powered by clean energy in 2050. Declaration of Independence, United States of America. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Delphi technique. This is a technique which is designed to persuade a group of people to accept a point of view that they probably would never agree with if they thought it through, while at the same time managing to convince those individuals that whatever it is that they've agreed to was their idea in the first place. The Delphi technique has nothing to do with the Delphic oracle, but is a plain, old-fashioned mind control technique. Brainwashing, if you like. The Delphic technique is often used in public meetings where Agenda 21 is on the menu and trained common purpose enthusiasts may be present. The basic principle is that anything which you say and which is not part of the plan will be ignored. It may be written down, but it will be ignored. The professionals who are presenting the meeting, which may be real or virtual, will have lots of charts and graphs and statistics. The room will contain shills who will be there to deflect concerns away from delicate areas, to sneer at critics, and to steer the conversation in the intended way. Anyone who objects to an Agenda 21 plan will be demonized as not caring about others. The constant theme is the community. Communitarianism depends on using social pressure to force people to conform in order to avoid being shamed. Agenda 21 isn't just a global process. The plan, which is working frighteningly well, has always been to create fake citizen involvement by developing regional agencies, non-governmental organizations, non-profit groups, charities, commissions, and special programs. Local media report on all these agencies and groups and make it sound as if local people are involved in planning their own future. But local people have no power, and local councils and officials have no power. Everything is coming to us from the faceless people behind Agenda 21, assisted by lobbyists, facilitators, shills, and bought editors and media owners. And the citizens trying to get on with their lives tend to shrug their shoulders. Exhausted by the confusion around them, they tend to say nothing. Anyone who speaks or writes about all this is dismissed as a conspiracy theorist. And here we are with democracy, the bit that inspired the whole preamble ramble tonight, which I think came together fairly well. So we got about a few more pages left, and we'll call it a day. Democracy. These days, democracy is not considered very important. Politicians have accustomed themselves to making decisions without bothering to assess public support. So politicians in the UK approved same-sex marriage when there were clear signs that the majority of public were opposed to it. When voters are allowed to vote on issues, they are often forced to vote again and again until they produce the acceptable correct answer. This has been the case with many votes on EU issues, and of course, when British voters decided to leave the EU, there were many calls for there to be another vote. Scottish citizens voted against independence, but Scottish politicians have repeatedly demanded a second vote. Breaking up the United Kingdom would suit the EU, the UN, and Agenda 21 very well. Democrat. A Democrat, particularly a social democrat, is someone who believes that power is too valuable to be entrusted to the people. Excuse me. Dentists. The British Dental Association has reported that dentists provided around 19 million fewer treatments between March and November 2020. The new rules about the cleaning of dental surgeries between patients mean that many dentists are closing their doors permanently. Unbelievable though it may seem, most people in England had no access to a dentist from March until November in 2020. There was no one to drill and fill bad teeth, no one to remove teeth that had passed their pull-by date, no one to clean teeth or preserve gums. Patients had no choice but to treat themselves with whatever home remedies they could find. Quite a number removed their own teeth using the time-honored method of tying one end of a piece of string to the painful tooth and the other end of the string to a doorknob, and then slamming the door. In 2020, only around half the usual number of child dental appointments were arranged. The long-term consequences are impossible to quantify, but they will be awesome. In early November 2020, it was announced that partial NHS dental services would be restored. A short time later, it was announced that England would be put under house arrest again. Deplatforming. Refusing to allow a speaker to speak by banning them or cancelling a planned lecture or series of lectures is known as deplatforming. It's a way of silencing dissenters and encouraging compliance. And also, it reinforces the consensus. Right? Reinforces consensus. Depopulation. One of the basic principles of Agenda 21 is that the global population needs to be reduced dramatically. The argument is that there are too many people around and not enough food to feed them. It is also argued that it is overpopulation, which is leading to global warming and also damaging the environment. All of this is tosh. Of course, there is plenty of food to feed the world's population. The only problem is that the food is often in the wrong place. And of course, while millions starve to death, millions more are gorging themselves to death. The global warming myth has been thoroughly discredited, and talk about the environment being irreversibly damaged is also politicized nonsense. Making plans to reduce the world's population is nothing new, of course. It's something that has been going on for many years. In the 1950s, American scientists suggested using perpetual warfare to decrease the world population. They also suggested releasing deadly viruses. The first suggestion fitted in well with the requirements of the military-industrial complex, and the second suited the pharmaceutical industry, which would, of course, make billions out of providing drugs to help protect some people from the viruses. In 1969, it was revealed that the U.S. Defense Department planned to produce new viruses designed to target and destroy the immune system, therefore making individuals more susceptible to infection. There is still much discussion about precisely which viruses were developed by the DOD. There have been numerous other depopulation policies and programs, and pressure has been applied to third world countries to try to force them to reduce the size of their populations. There have been reports that birth control drugs have been included in a number of inoculation programs, and there are reports that many of the wars which started in Africa and Latin America were encouraged in order to reduce populations. Many of the individuals who are involved in the Agenda 21 process are keen to reduce the size of the world's population. Bill Gates and Boris Johnson both believe there are too many of us and are both keen to bring the world's population down considerably. So does Prince Charles, and so does Prince Philip, who wanted to be reincarnated as a virus to kill most of us. And Boris Johnson's father has said the same thing. And let me grab something from the shelf over there on the topic of Boris Johnson's father, and also on the topic of Bill Gates. got 2 more books to recommend for you. How about that? Surprise, surprise. So the first one is, Gates of Hell. Why Bill Gates is the Most Dangerous Man in the World by Daniel Jupp. I grabbed this one off the shelf. I haven't read it all the way through yet, but I did give it a flick through to check out the resources. And he's got a really good intro where he talks about the sources that he's picked and how he has tried to be as fair as he possibly could. So he talks about the kinds of sources that he rejected. I think it was the bibliography, actually, that where I was reading that. Let me go to the right page. So 317 is the bibliography. And he writes a little bit about chapter 30 is called Nerdtopia is a Kind of Hell. It's a big one to read, but I think it's a bit banned. I think he's got a bit of a copyright warning. So yeah, he talks about the choice of sources and background reading for the book. And he lays out his principles for why he picked what he did. He says he doesn't distinguish between the respectability of sources. He doesn't worry about overusing or underusing sources. The majority of commentary falls into 2 categories, and he has tried to avoid using any sources that are overly one-sided. And he says, this bit here was interesting, number 5. I personally remain undecided on the issue of whether the actions and policies of Gates are deliberately malign and intended to harm others, whether they do not intend harm but are solely enacted for selfish accumulation of wealth and power, or whether they are harmful in effect but entirely noble in intention. I lean towards them being neither entirely psychopathic nor entirely altruistic, but a dangerous combination of idealism and self-interest which favors unwise policies. My choice of sources reflects this position. So I thought it was worth mentioning, He's tried to be fair, he's tried to be even, and this is the title of the book that he settled on. So there's one. There's Bill Gates, if you want to learn a bit more about him. Excuse me. I think it's 20... Let me see, when is this one? This is a 2018, 19... 2023. 2023, there you go. So, during lockdowns. And then the other book I wanted to tell you about is this one. So, we just heard about Boris Johnson's dad. There's a man called Stanley Johnson, and he's written a book called Life Without Birth. Because why? Because why not, right? Isn't that the goal? That's the idea. They don't want birth anymore. They want test tube babies. They want brave new world birthing centers and that whole scientific, expert-driven, technocratic control over the whole process. So, Life Without Birth, that's a book written by Stanley Johnson. And there he is. It says, a former employee of the World Bank, Stanley Johnson received a degree in 1969, served as project director of the USA National Policy Panel on World Population. He is a research associate of the Overseas Development Institute and is at present studying in England on a Ford Foundation grant. So there's Stanley Johnson. And not only did he write this book where he flies around the world trying to figure out how third world countries mainly are doing with population control and birth control, etc. Not only did he write that book, Life Without Birth. There it is. Let's see if we've got that's 1970 book. Not only did he write that, but he also wrote a novel about a virus, which I think he was called The Virus. I got to look that up. I don't have a copy of it, I'm afraid. But it's worth thinking about because Vernon Coleman just mentioned it. So let's have a look. Stanley Johnson. Basketball. No, we don't want him. We want Stanley Johnson, the writer. I will move this over here so you can see what I'm looking at, because I know you feel a bit left out if I'm browsing the internet and you don't get to see what it is that I see. But here we are. Here's Stanley Johnson, writer. Okay, so Stanley Johnson, writer. Yeah, LJ says, remind me how many children Boris has? Well, Stanley's got 6. So this guy's got 6. And if you go to books and other writing, you can see that he wrote a novel in 2015 called The Virus, which is a thriller about the rise of a mysterious virus and the fight to stop a deadly pandemic. The Virus, HarperCollins, 2015. Yeah. So that's how much Stanley Johnson believes in depopulation. He's having 6 children, and he's writing novels about viruses. But yeah, the question about how many does Boris Johnson have, let's have a quick look. Born citizenship, spouses, parents. It doesn't even say. It just gives you, he's had 3 spouses. Doesn't tell you about how many children he's got. They left that bit out. That's a secret. You're not allowed to know about that. You're not allowed to know about that. But he has smoked cannabis, so that makes him affable, relatable chap, doesn't it? And for all the taxpayer money that he has undoubtedly embezzled, he can buy himself a comb. But there you are. Life Without Birth by Stanley Johnson and Gates of Hell, Daniel Jupp. 2 books you might want to grab hold of. So we had a lot of book recommendations tonight in the end, haven't we? Okay. We got, I think, one more section to finish off, and then we're going to wrap up tonight's show. But yes, this whole bit here is absolutely on the money. These people are obsessed with Depop, but not for themselves, because they're not people, right? This is what we learned at the very beginning. People, people are the aristocracy are not part of the people. Remember that? Remember the etymology that we looked at right at the beginning? The people are enfranchised to vote. We are given the right to vote by the non-people, by the ruling group. And that's what the useless elite is, the parasites. That's who the Johnsons are. And the Bill Gates is. And the Prince Charles, the sustainable prince, right? And Prince Philip, who said he would, once he died, would come back as a virus to take out a bunch of people. And he died right before the COVID, the Emperor's New Pandemic was announced. So that little paragraph there has a whole lot in it worth checking out. So the last section we're going to look at right now is digital currencies. Actually, I think we might just leave it there. I think we're just going to leave it there. We'll do digital currencies next time. It'll be a good place to pick up. So let's stop there. We're done with the reading for tonight. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? Did you enjoy that, folks? Folks at home? I hope you did. I'm going to put my book cam out of the way, and then we'll do some closing thoughts. There you go. You can see my messy desk. Hope you enjoyed the reading tonight. I think, so important concepts I think that we got to touch on tonight are mainly just that we want to be asking questions, and the kind of questions we want to be asking are, where do rights come from? Mummy, where do rights come from? And who grants them to who? And why? And how are rights applied? And are they applied fairly and equally? Because we're told that diversity and inclusivity and equity and equality is all important. But I think we don't see that happen in reality. We see certain groups get advantages and benefits and access to resources and services that other groups don't get. That's racism. But racism occurs while we're being told inclusivity and diversity and fairness and justice and equality is happening. So we got to ask questions. We've got to pay very close attention to what's actually going on in reality versus what we're being told to say and think and do and feel and believe. Quite a lot of the time with the mainstream consensus building media, they'll leave a lot of stuff out. So just like the political spectrum that we looked at, the traditional left-right political spectrum shows you this much. Actually, there's this whole other part to the spectrum over here that they're not telling you about. There's this whole area of thought, of ideas, of topics for discussion and consideration and analysis that they're just leaving off the menu. And that's called the Overton window. The Overton window is the acceptable range of opinion that you can have. It's fine to be on the left. It's fine to be on the right. No problem. If you want to stand back and go, I think the whole system's a load of bullshit and I don't want to participate in it, where do I go? That's when you get your front door kicked in and you get dragged away live on YouTube. Okay, I think we're good. No bangs from downstairs. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for tonight's broadcast. I have been a bit low energy today than usual, but I hope you got some nourishment from it nevertheless. We are going to continue with the book until it's done. We are about, my goodness, we're probably not even we're over a quarter, but less than a third of the way through it. We got plenty more to go. Special thanks to Vernon Coleman for letting us read the entire book on the show. VernonColeman.com. That's his website. His books are for sale on Amazon. Buy them, pass them around. LJ just said she's been following along at home. That's really great to hear. I really like that idea of people getting their own books and following along and making your annotations and your notes in there. And, it's all grist for the mill, as Frank would say, because I just saw you pop in there. Grist for the mill. It's all about getting our brain moving and working, getting the cogs whirring, and helping ourselves understand things so that we can help others around us. That's what it all comes down to. It's like inner work that we do to improve ourselves so that then we can help others, the people we love, the people we care about, the people we may be responsible for if we have children, or colleagues or something, young people who we can reach out to and influence. It's really the young and the elderly who are the main targets here. In my opinion, especially the young. The elderly are being neglected in a big way and it's horrific, but the young are really the targets of all the stuff that we're living through and witnessing and these kinds of agendas that Vernon Coleman's explaining, because they're the people who are being indoctrinated with this communitarian global neighborhood way of thinking that will lead to their complete and utter enslavement, right? So maybe we can go back very, very quickly to have a little look at this old pic. Like Mark Passio said, we're on this thing here, right? And we want to be climbing to this peak. We want to be raising consciousness. I don't really like the word enlightened, but you can either be a dumb unconscious thing going around just being driven by the base animal instincts that we all have, or you could be a higher thinking, higher minded individual who uses their discernment, their reason, their intellect, their intuition, their moral, their decision, free will, their decision-making power, their free will to be moral, and try and get us closer to this situation of freedom, right? Not that freedom is like an easy, comfortable, safe way of life. Okay, there's danger inherent in freedom. There's risk. You gotta have responsible adults. You gotta be responsible for yourself and the other people who are dependent on you. You gotta be capable. That's what a lot of people don't like. But the problem is that people's unwillingness to turn themselves into capable, responsible adults who can take care of themselves and others is leading all of us to slide down into just total control and some sort of fascistic, communistic, technocratic, digital slavery system. And we're just seeing it unfold before our very eyes, day by day. The number of people just hypnotized by the voodoo that is pumped into our minds via the screens, via the internet, is bringing us ever closer day by day. And every individual contributes to that. And are you contributing to that slide down towards the slavery, or are you contributing to that hard push upwards towards freedom, right? That is the question I will leave you with. Super grateful to have you all joining me live. If you watched on the replay, hope you enjoyed that. Please remember allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. You can find ways to support, share, like, comment, subscribe, donate, all that good stuff. Shoot me an email. I would love to hear from you if you want to talk about anything. I think that's all I got to say for now. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your bank holiday weekend if you're in the UK, and make the most of it. And take care of yourselves and each other. And I'll see you next Friday where we continue with part 5. Okay? So enjoy yourselves. Be good. Be good people. Be moral people. And God bless.